Hello, welcome to this meeting of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Panel on Monday, the 25th of March, 2024. My name is Councillor Chris Moriarty, and I will be chairing this meeting. This meeting has been held in person and via Zoom and streamed live to the public on YouTube. I remind all attendees that participation in this meeting indicates consent to the audio and video being streamed live, and acknowledgement that after the meeting it will continue to be made available in the public domain. Firstly, it'd be useful if all panel members and officers could introduce themselves so that the public are aware of who is in this meeting and the role they are undertaking. So, as I said, I'm Chris Moriarty, I'm the chair of this panel, and then I'll go to our vice chair for introductions. Thank you.
Mark Howard, the councillor for Bisham and Cookham, here as vice chair.
Councillor Julian Teasy, I'm a voting member of the panel.
Councillor Mark Wilson, also voting member of the panel.
Councillor Gary Reeves, ward councillor for Cox Green and member of the panel.
Good evening, everyone. Councillor Julian Sharp, voting member of the panel.
Councillor Maureen Hunt, voting member of the panel.
David Buckley, voting member of the panel.
Councillor Helen Price, voting member of the panel.
Assistant Director for Strategy and Communications.
Stephen Evans, Chief Executive Officer.
Mark Bealey, Principal Democratic Services Officer for Overview and Scrutiny.
Lovely, thank you very much. I request that meeting participants do not speak unless I specifically invite them to do so. Once I've invited you to speak, before you do so, please state your name and the capacity in which you are speaking, if appropriate, and I will also ask officers to speak at appropriate times. If any individual attempts to disrupt the meeting, I'm able to use my powers in the Constitution to adjourn the meeting or have that individual removed. Also, at this stage, before we start, I'm sure members, officers and residents of the borough will wish Her Royal Highness the Princess of Wales the best of health following her announcement last week, and wish her and her family all the best. And in terms of the agenda, when we go to the agenda, just to let members know, we're just going to switch 5 and 6. So we're going to do the Think Family presentation briefly before we go into the budget, unless anyone has any objections to that. No? Lovely stuff. Okay, in which case we'll move on to agenda item 1, which is apologies for absence.
No apologies received, Chair.
Lovely, thank you very much. None for the room. Lovely. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest for any of the items today. Good. Item 3, the minutes. So this is to consider and approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of January 2024. So whether we've got comments in advance or anyone wants to make any comments in today's meeting on those minutes. No, all good. Lovely stuff. So that brings us to the first substantive item, which is the council plan. So Stephen's going to give us a very brief introduction. When we go through our questions, I'll sort of go through it in a moment, but let's try and do it, and it's quite a big document, so we're going to try and do it in segments to kind of keep the flow going. But Stephen, if I hand over to you in first instance to introduce it for us.
Thank you, Chair. So really pleased to bring the draft of the new council plan to scrutiny tonight. This is our most important strategic document for the organisation. It sets out our vision for the borough and for the organisation over the next 4 years. It sets out our main strategic aims and priorities. Some of the deliverables will focus on to achieve those aims, and the performance measures we'll use to keep track of our progress against which the people of the borough can hold us to account. As a document, it's not meant to cover everything we do, so just because something we do isn't reflected in the council plan doesn't mean in all cases it's not important. But the plan is designed to give the people of the borough, our staff and our partners a strong sense of what we're about as a local authority. It's also our strategic plan to frame budget decisions so that resources follow strategy and that we prioritise accordingly. And we know that RBWM is in a challenging place financially, and it's essential then that we have a plan we're focused on delivering to see us through the next few years. And building on the financial recovery plan that was agreed by Cabinet in April and Council last autumn, The new plan is designed to provide a set of priorities and deliverables we'll coalesce around as an organisation as we face up to the challenges and opportunities ahead. So it's also important to say we're also a very lean council, and we've got significantly less capacity to deliver compared to, I think, pretty much every other unitary council in the country. So we therefore need to focus on our efforts on delivering what's in the plan and not being distracted too much by other lower order priorities. In terms of how we've got to this point and bringing this to you this evening, the plan is going to Cabinet on Wednesday, and we'll, I'm sure, take on board any comments and recommendations from tonight. And then full council on the 16th of April for final approval. We've held a number of engagement events with various groups and people and community groups over the course of the autumn to get us to this point. We've had engagement sessions with staff and with councillors to help shape the plan. And it's been good. The engagement's been good and it's been appreciated, and we've tried to reflect the feedback in the document. Once it's been agreed by council next month, I'll be leading a series of all staff briefings to launch the plan with colleagues. That will be followed up by further sessions at directorate and individual team level, and will also be sent to our strategic partners. We'll keep the plan up to date and relevant via an annual review to look at the progress we've made against what we said we'd do, and also to look at those areas which might need to be adjusted, because we're recognising we work in an ever-changing environment. And finally, we'll also continue to present progress against the performance targets to Cabinet and to Scrutiny on a quarterly basis, as we've been doing over the last few months. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. So as Stephen said there, this goes to Cabinet on Wednesday. So our comments from today and our recommendations, if there are any, will be going alongside that paper. Mark will touch on that at the end of the discussion, just to remind us what the process is going to be over the next couple of days. In terms of this discussion, we've got Becky here available to us, who's led the team that put a lot of this work together, if not all of this work together into this document. But if it's okay with the panel, what I'm proposing is that we have sort of themes to our questions so that we can move through it systematically. So if we start off anything around general process, general sort of questions around this document, its role, how it came into existence, we tackle that first. And then we'll go through each of the aims. There's 5 aims, and perhaps we can look at those in terms of the content of those aims and the metrics and KPIs that have been attached to it, as opposed to doing the aims and then coming on to metrics, and it all gets a bit muddled. So hopefully that makes sense. And as ever, if you want to ask a question that's relevant to a discussion at that moment in time, just pop your name on the list, catch my eye, and we'll bring you in rather than waiting for you to come back in 10 minutes after we've discussed something with a question. There we go. There's the landscape. So let's open things up. Councillor Price.
I just want to make a comment about the consultation. So when the consultation was laid out, I was very impressed by the approach you were taking of the different groups. And I attended everyone. So I think I've been involved in about 6 consultation events because I'm very interested in this. I was disappointed, though, that it appeared the employers didn't participate as much as we would have hoped. And so what lessons can be learned, because they are an important part within the organisation. So I suppose that bit I just wanted to tease out in terms of consultation.
So we did try twice to organise an event for businesses, which didn't have a huge take up. And we also did an online survey that was sent out. I think the lesson probably learned for us is that on its own, a session on engaging with our council plan probably isn't enough of a draw for them. And we tried to link it in with some other events that were happening, but the timings didn't quite work. So I think there is some learning from that. However, we have had some really successful engagement with, we have ongoing, very well attended and successful engagement with businesses. And during all of those conversations, we are drawing out information about their priorities. So we did bring in our knowledge and awareness of their priorities to setting this plan. even though they didn't sit there and go through it word by word. But I concede your point.
Can I
follow up on that? Yeah.
I wasn't following, it was a
Oh,
different
okay, yeah, no
point,
problem,
different
yeah,
point.
of course.
Okay. So it's looking at how this will be monitored generally and how then it will be adapted as circumstances change. And I think there could be a role for this committee in that, and I didn't see that actually in any of the paperwork, so it was just a suggestion.
Well, funnily enough, that was a question, a conversation we had just prior to the meeting about the role of this group and also the QAR that's under the review as well, because clearly objectives and circumstances change as we go. Stephen, I don't know if you wanted to talk to that.
Really, I've been really impressed with the level of scrutiny from this committee on our quarterly performance report. That's really welcomed, particularly as someone who's kind of been in authorities where perhaps there hasn't been that level of kind of intelligent scrutiny. I think that's a positive. So that will continue. So we'll continue to bring the kind of components of the plan through to scrutiny on a quarterly basis. Clearly, we are here tonight and going forward when we do the annual review. So this is a 4-year plan, but as I've said, we will refresh it annually to do the sort of look back against how we've delivered against what we said we would do, but also to look at, do any of the priorities need to change? Again, I would expect to have a good discussion here in advance of that going through to Cabinet and Council in the normal way. So I think throughout the year, there are key stages where this committee will play an important role.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rees.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comment about the scrutiny and the intelligence of the scrutiny that we've done. And it's obviously, I think that's something we've prided ourselves on and feel is really key for an effective council. As part of that scrutiny, for us to feel effective, we need to make sure that we can have the oversight of the KPIs in the right manner and give us the tools to be able to do that. There was one thing that stood out for me, which I think we mentioned on a previous meeting as well, is under the key implications. So this is number 2 on the, I think it's in the document prior to the plan, not in the actual plan itself. Do you see it? And in there it sets out a table of key implications. So we have the outcome, council plan delivered, and then we have unmet, met, exceeded, significantly exceeded, and then a date of delivery. We spoke previously about quantifying that more because it's still a little ambiguous as to how we can define that, because for us to then try and scrutinize you on that, we need to know what we think that is. It's very subjective to say majority of KPI show performance are on track, good progress against majority of deliverables, and then the exceeded and significantly exceeded said progress exceeds milestones identified in technical appendix, which is where all the KPIs are, which is great as you're benchmarking. Performance against KPIs above target in substantial number. So we're talking about majority and substantial. And we did mention this in a previous scrutiny panel about actually qualifying that, not just using that. So I still think that there's a gap here in us being able to be even more intelligent and sophisticated in the way we can scrutinize and evaluate it. And I know the KPIs individually have their own measurements, some of them. Some still don't have measurements, which I've looked at, and they've still got to be benchmarked. So I'm wondering if, first of all, I just wanted to cover that. And then I've got other questions, but I'll come to them as we get to them, because I know you want to keep it structured as we go through, but that was right at the beginning of the document.
Something on that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair point. I would be slightly loath to set a number of, if X% or this number of our KPI are kind of green or amber, then that means that we've exceeded, because I guess then that we want to set challenging targets. We want to have KPI that measure things that are risks and that are challenges for the council. And in some cases, that may mean that we're choosing things on purpose that are areas of concern so that we can monitor them closely and so that we can take mitigating actions. So there begins to be a bit of a perverse incentive if we're only successful if we're achieving all of our KPI. Do you see what I mean?
No, I do understand what you're saying. You're within the KPIs themselves. You want to set challenging targets, which means that potentially you could expose yourself to a risk of being amber or red on those purely because you want to try and, push people to get it. And you might not get there the first time, you might, get there the second time, or who knows, you might, based on some of the, based on the performances we've been seeing so far with the current council, I can see potentially that you are going to achieve the you're always challenging yourself. I think that's great. But this is like an overriding, I hate to say it's like Ofsted, right? It's like just a one word, like met, unmet, and that's not a joke, obviously that's quite serious point. I don't want to touch on that but I do feel that, I do think that we need to try, you say that, but unmet is performance off track on greater than 40% of KPIs. So you felt that it was okay to put a measurement on unmet. So why can't we put, even if it's a range, like if you can put it on one, why can't we put it on the others? And these are roll-ups. I get you might want to challenge yourself on some of the KPIs, but there are so many of them that if we're talking about a rolled up percentage, I think a good, what we say, a majority of deliverables, you have to live by, we should put what that means.
Yeah.
What's a majority? You could put it between, I don't know, majority would have to be, obviously, if it's greater than 40% failure, then maybe we need to say you've achieved on majority would have to be 60 to 70% or some, and then leave yourself some room to get exceed and, significantly exceeded.
That's a fair challenge. We can have that. Come back to the range. I mean, just as an example, though, within children's services, they've been performing really well overall and have just significantly upped their ambition on targets, say, for outcomes for care leavers. So that means that their performance indicator, although the performance is improving, it's gone from green to amber because the target's been increased, and you wouldn't want them to be kind of punished for increasing their ambition.
Yeah, but isn't this an overall?
Yes.
Is it, or am I, or is this applied to every single? Because it seems to be that this is of all of the KPIs together, rather than isolating place or isolating, particular service. This is supposed to account for the whole of the council's performance. That's what we're here to scrutinise. And otherwise, you're leaving it up to us to decide what majority looks like and what. I mean, we can do that between us, but we might have a difference of opinion from you.
Stephen, do you want to come in here?
Yeah, this is where the importance of having proper scrutiny, both at officer level and member level, comes in. So yes, we can look at the overall metrics, and it's always clearly pleasing to see when we've got many more green indicators than ambers or reds. But actually, in getting into discussions about this, I would be really concerned, for example, if we were off track on things such as child protection for obvious reasons. So we are good at that, and our performance shows that we are good at that, but we're not complacent. So we need to make sure that it was that balance between what's the kind of higher level metric looking like, how are we performing as an overall organisation, but also then going down into detail of those areas, particularly where there will be obvious areas where we need to drill into concerns if it has safeguarding and other kind of individual impacts, and that's where the balance between overall quality versus scrutiny on things, particularly where safeguarding is apparent.
On the individual one is what I was saying. Absolutely, we look at the right, the metrics. That's why there's some great metrics in here. The KPIs are there. We can see that, and we'll obviously go on to them in a bit more detail. This was just solely talking about the overall performance and how to rate that. And I want to be able to credit you with the good work that all the team are doing, but then we get into semantics and subjectiveness of what is substantial and what is a majority. And exceeded and significantly exceeded seems to have the same definition. If you look at the table, they're not different. It's like they've got the exact same definition, which again, how do we gauge between that? But I don't want to keep going over and over it, but I think we've noted it, so I think that's great. Thank you.
Councillor Hunt.
I agree with Councillor Reeves. The more informed we are, the more intelligently we can scrutinise. And this, well, plus or minus, isn't good enough, quite frankly. The track and report, bigger is better, doesn't give us much information. So I fully agree with Councillor Reeves.
We bring the quarterly performance report, it has the narrative there against for each directorate. So it goes into more detail about those areas of challenge and also those areas where we're performing well. So this is the council plan which sets out the new targets, but when we bring it as part of the quarterly performance report, it has that narrative from the relevant directors, and in most cases directors are here and colleagues are here to present those challenges and opportunities and answer your questions.
Lovely. Councillor Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, also agree with Councillor Reeves's comments, and I think just want to pick up a couple of things. I would certainly agree with having you know, some clear criteria for each of those four categories: unmet, met, exceeded, and significantly exceeded. Because at the moment I'm reading it that the unmet is performance off track on greater than 40% of KPIs, which could be say 45%, which means 55% are met, but then met is a majority, which is also 55%. So there's a bit of a, we don't want to get into that at all. We just want a clear, okay, are we unmet, are we met, have we exceeded, have we significantly exceeded? And I appreciate that it's a roll up and it's of limited meaning, and that some individual KPIs will be of great importance, Stephen, as you said. So yeah, I think just a quantification would almost simplify it and be helpful.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a really unfortunate missed opportunity. I think that the way this plan has been written seems to be something which simply embeds mediocrity into the system, and you're dealing. I always look at these things from the point of view of where will our residents benefit from this document and from what we're saying here. And so much of this document is about our own internal activity in terms of we will develop a new plan or develop a new way of doing something, which actually, when it comes down to it, does not benefit our residents. So we're taking time and effort to get involved with and develop something which isn't benefiting our residents. And we're also embedding mediocrity into the system because we're not looking to put excellence into the system. I haven't seen anything in here which says you're going to, for example, the vast majority of the section which is about education, and we've got thousands of children in this area, all of that concentrates on the children in care. None of it concentrates on the excellent children who are going through the state school system and who are not going to benefit from this. So I don't see anywhere where this is fully benefiting the population in general and children in particular, and that's something I'm really concerned with.
Thank you very much. Do officers want to make any comment on that? So we'll just take that down as a note. Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Teasey.
Thank you, Chair. Can I, before I just check, I noticed at the very start you said you'd like to structure this meeting or this pod according to themes. Can I just clarify where we are, because there have been quite some general comments. Are we just the general, like, what are the aims first before we go into the specifics? Okay, all right, I will deal with that. I wanted to make the point that I disagree with what I've just heard actually, and I think that this is when I look at the aims, two things appear to me. Number one is that most of them are in fact outward looking. They are outward looking. It's certainly, I mean, maybe aim one, which we asked to be put front and centre about putting the council on a strong financial footing. That's more inward looking, I get that. But the rest is really looking outward about the type of borough that we want: cleaner, safer, greener, children having a great start, people living healthy lives. And then, okay, we go back in a high performing council that does deliver those things, but ultimately that's outward looking. The second point that I wanted to make at this stage is that I really appreciate, Councillor Price mentioned this earlier about the many consultations that we had. This has gone through a lot of consultation, and I appreciate the fact that we've gone this through the mill. And in fact, specifically when it comes to these aims, we have had specific input into this. I mean, I remember it was one of the things that I think this body, or certainly this body, we insisted that actually that first one, you know, the sub point one was the first thing we mentioned about continuing to improve scrutiny of the budget, to manage our risks, to improve the council's financial position. Simply because where we are, we said that should go the first. I think there was another one, I think on page 11, no, sorry, page 35, where I think, again, we asked the aim to be changed, and it was, and I'm trying to remember. Well, look, it doesn't matter. Yes, so before we go to the specific things, and certainly I will obviously have a few words to say about the financial ones in particular, I just do want to commend the process that we have gone through to get to this stage, which I think has been good.
Thank you, Councillor Teasey. Councillor Howard.
I would also like to echo, I think that the process we're going through is a good one. I think it's showing us a change and evolution in the way that the council is thinking about how it starts to clarify what it wants to achieve. I have two things which I would like to point out. The first one is really minor, but if we had some numbers on the documents, it would allow us to register them easier. So in other words, aim 2, strategic priority number 1, or number 2, or number 3. It would just allow us to hit that a little easier, which I'm sure is dead easy. The second thing is my little pet subject, engagement with other groups. I think the consultation's gone well, but it's not that which I would like to point out, is that I would really be liking to see that this document was embodying inside the culture of the council a want to make relationships with other parts of the community and to make it fundamental in it. Now, if I go and do something naughty, so if you go with my mum, the only time I could see other things being engaged in that way was in aim number 5, where engagement with others came up. Yet I would also say is that possibly the most people I talk to in my ward would like to be engaged with the things that they are more regularly affected by. And that tends to be things which are not adult services or even children's services. It tends to be the place type issues or the plannings and various other things. So just that one little point, which is a bit about culture. I think we're moving in the right way, but I don't know how to embed it myself, but I'm throwing that point back to you.
Very fair point, and kind of challenge accepted, really. I listened to what Councillor Moriarty said at Budget Council on community engagement. I know that Councillor Price talks to the team a lot about this, and I feel like we are moving in the right direction, but it's inconsistent across the organisation. It's inconsistent across services, and I think you know, we've talked about, and we've updated our community engagement framework, but actually our focus now has got to be how do we embed that across the organisation, and how, you know, we've got some teams where it's second nature and they think about that. We've got some others where they're not quite at that point yet. We've got a communities team, we've got a kind of corporate centre, if you like, which we can look at how do we lift every team up to those teams which do this as kind of second nature. So I think that is a fair challenge, and I think we probably will look at how we might bring this out a little bit in the final version, because it is important and I get why it's important.
Just to add into that, I mean, it's obviously a way of making many hands make light work, especially on the financial front.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. Councillor Price.
Yes, I just want to disagree with Councillor Sharp said. In education, we've got of the borough schools rated as by Ofsted as good or outstanding. We're going for over 95%. Well, that's everybody. So there is a very challenging target there. And there's also under the green environment, that's affecting everybody. So I don't see it as being unambitious, and I don't see it as only affecting certain groups and missing out the majority. I see this as covering all of our residents, but with a particular emphasis that we want to make sure that those that are disadvantaged are less disadvantaged because of what we're doing.
Thank you very much. Councillor Reeves.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I don't understand the comment, but just to be clear, I think what we've set out here and what's within the council plan is very clearly looking at what we can do best for the residents. For example, yes, we might be concentrating quite often on a lot of things to do with adult services and child services and get, you know, early engagement and trying to reduce, for example, the use of outside borough accommodation and services, because it all has a major impact on the budget. And I tell you what, if that doesn't impact all our residents, what does? Because we're carrying a huge debt. And the one thing we have to do for our residents is have a good financial footing so that we can build the right future for them, the future that they want, as well as still achieving some of these aims. You know, 77% of our budget is spent on those essential statutory services. And that's the right thing we need to do, with supporting the people that are most in need through that budget. And with these things that we've set out, we've clearly identified as a council, that's where we need to make differences, is actually around those spaces and in that area, because that will help us actually release more resources and more things to be able to do other things. And we do have lots of KPIs in here about that impact our residents. I don't know how many times I've knocked on the door or spoken to someone and they said about potholes. Well, there's a KPI about potholes. What about litter picking? There's one in there about litter picking. There's one there about food law, compliant, you know, restaurant with food law. Well, that's protecting the residents so that they can actually eat in places that are, you know, obviously fit for them to actually eat in. Borough CO2 emissions, again, that's impacting everybody's breathing. And even the council's direct CO2 emissions from their operations, they're actually tackling that as well. Again, has a huge impact on the residents because it's the air that they breathe. You know, we're losing enough of the green space in this borough that's going to actually make that even more difficult. So I think there's lots of challenging things in there that are impacting all the residents. But that's my point around that. And I was going to ask about something specific, which before we get into the KPIs, I know we're sort of going down, and it is one of the early bits. You mentioned about a £13 million investment in council infrastructure, and I just wanted to ask, does that include all of the CRM and the upcoming CMSs? There's the Liquid Logic, Mosaic, and also the public-facing websites coming up. Is that 13 million can contribute, you know, take account of those infrastructure improvements as well?
Yeah, I think the 13 million is more the kind of physical infrastructure of the borough.
Oh, okay.
The place type capital programme. Okay. But can I just come back on the, I guess to go back to what I said at the beginning around, this is a kind of high level strategic document, and we tried to keep it as short as possible. So kind of the technical appendix, which has got all the kind of deliverables and the KPIs, the kind of front end, if you like, leaving aside the forward from myself and the leader, is kind of 5 or 6 pages. What sits kind of beneath this or alongside it are many reports which bring the priorities to life. So, for example, regarding education, we're of course really proud of our excellent schools as a borough, and that is one of the things which attracts people to the borough. And I personally have benefited from the excellent education that the borough has given me. Separately, we'll be taking a report to Cabinet, I think, in either this month or next month on kind of education performance, which will set out more detail about our education performance and schools and the areas which are going well, but also those areas where actually we need to do better. So the detail of a lot of this will be taken through other documents, whether it's around our sustainability strategy, net zero, or education. This is meant to be high level, supported by those more detailed documents, which in most cases will come through member committees for further discussion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a couple of further points. Just referring to aim 5 and the high performing council, very pleased to see the point about strengthening governance, transparency and accountability. I think those 3 things are really important, and they also reflect, I think, a very significant change from the past, which I very much welcome. I'd also like to endorse Councillor Howard's point about, in particular, relationships with parishes, because I know I attend the Eton Town Council on a regular basis, and they are very vocal in saying, you know, use us. They're obviously a sort of another level of local government, and they are a point of consolidation of information from residents, and they feel they could be, in that sense, used more for the benefit of the RBWM work. Yes, just to reference that specifically.
Councillor Reeves.
Okay, so I think I get a sense we're onto the aims now. A bit more.
No, still talking general. Have you got, is yours about one of the
I was
aims?
going to take us into the aims because I thought
I'll do that, Gary, that's fine. Can I come to you in a second then about the aims? Because I've got just 2 points for myself generally, and I don't think a response is needed, it's more feedback. I think 2 things that struck me when I looked through this, that, you know, on top of what we've heard so far, with the KPIs, one thing I think would be useful, where this sits, whether it's in the quarterly reports, is kind of the shifts. We've talked a little bit about, you know, what you're saying about children's services. They were here, moving to here. Well, actually, it'd be quite nice to see current state, where we're, you know, what our aim is and progress towards that. It gives a bit of context to, you know, where that sits, I guess, on a spectrum. The other thing I'd just like to ponder, I think, to take away. I know how difficult objective setting are, particularly when we're trying to get outcome-based objectives. They're notoriously difficult. Now, I'm going to highlight an objective which we might talk about when we talk about specific aims, but I'm just using it as an example at the moment. Is in the children's services, there's a percentage of EHCP assessments completed within 20 weeks, which very reasonable target. I guess for me, I think that we should just be conscious of looking at objectives as we go through the year, about making sure we're measuring stuff at the right stage, because, you know, there's a process to get to an assessment, or to grant an assessment, isn't there, before that? So, you know, I'm not suggesting for a second this is what happens, but the reason I picked that out is, and Becky, you touched on it earlier on about penalising people for stretching and stuff, is that objectives, when they end up in people's personal objectives, they kind of shape behaviour, and it's very easy for an objective to have potentially negative, unexpected consequences as people sort of not game the system, but, you know, naturally fall into a pattern. So I guess for us as part of scrutiny, it'd be useful just to have a sort of check that, yeah, these objectives are still appropriate. We're not, you know, because they're new, some of them are new and we don't know yet. So I guess that's the only feedback I'd have on that. So, Councillor Reeves, I didn't know if you want to take us into our first aim, which is the one about the financial footing with the council.
Thank you, Councillor Moriarty, for allowing me to start. Yeah, no, I was just looking at this because the first aim 1, which is to put the council in strong financial footing to serve the borough effectively, and it talks about obviously scrutiny, forecasting, monitoring. You know, I think we've heard, and it's nice for Stephen to actually lament on the fact that actually seeing a greater scrutiny from us. So it helps us feel that all those hours that we invest into this and you know, to come here and talk to you about it is helping. I also noticed that what's really good is that we've been able to scrutinise the council plan before it's actually gone into implementation as well. And I think the timing of everything is now seems to be settling down, which we did have a question of previously, and it's really good to see that that's actually now aligned. I think that the calendar's been put together really well for the upcoming year as well. So really appreciate that we're now getting this opportunity to do it. Within one of those, it says create a new performance and resources board chaired by executive director of resources, tended by to scrutinise, monitor forecasting risk and saving delivery. And then also you have the ELT. I suppose my question is, because we've got our QAR reporting, is there an opportunity that we could have some sort of like bullet point? I know you're going to do like a summary of certain things. Will you be able to bring some of the key outcomes or discussions from those boards into the QAR? Is that possible?
So the kind of timing is that it goes through the Performance and Resources Board first, which is chaired by Elizabeth as the executive director, and it pulls together assistant directors, so that kind of tier down who are closer to the operational delivery. They consider it, that then goes through ELT, and then it goes through scrutiny, so here and cabinet. So actually what you're seeing when you get the report here is a culmination of that process. So very much that board does look at, you know, areas of concern, where we're on track and what do we need to do about that, and highlighting areas where actually we're performing well. So that's kind of already baked into the reports you see.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Howard.
Thank you. In aim 1, looking at the, well, I'll do the quick question first, which is the optimise the use of buildings strategic priority. Little surprised that our existing arrangements with, I presume it's the PropCorp, don't have this. And I am wondering how they've been allowed not to have this, to be brutally honest. It sounds like a bit of a failure inside the PropCorp, not to have a plan of how you're going to manage your assets and to understand their commercial benefit. Sorry, nasty question.
And I guess what we've got to look at, as we talked about when we kind of talked about financial recovery in the autumn, is clearly one of those strands has got to be to look at the assets we hold currently, and I guess ask ourselves some questions. Do we need to hold those assets for operational reasons? And if so, are we utilising the space within those assets effectively? So one example I'll give you is the building where our pensions team is. That comes out over the road. That comes up for renewal. Rather than paying more in rent for an external building, we'll be planning to bring that team back into this building from next April. So that's a kind of way of using operational assets. And then we've got to ask questions about, you know, are we using commercial? If we've got commercial assets, is that generating the required income? Can we sweat the asset more? And then I guess, you know, we've got 200 million of debt as an organisation. We've got to look at, and we don't currently have a clear plan to bring that down. We've got to look at how can we tackle that by getting in capital receipts, and that's got to be a big focus going forward. So I think there was a plan, but we're developing that plan, I guess, with a new framework of we've really got to go hard and fast on this because of the financial situation.
So it's more of a case of revising and constantly updating the existing plan. So it read as if that up until now there wasn't a plan, which, to be brutally honest, having a plan is a good step forward from that. So there's that. Slightly cheeky, I'm going to go for a second question. With the KPIs, and I'm looking at the strategic priority, maximise the income we receive. And I know it's difficult to put a KPI on effectively entrepreneurial spotting of an opportunity. But I am noticing everything is about cost, and I'm not looking at the how do we, as you previously said about the popcorn, make more out of what we've got at the moment. So I don't know how we put that in, but I think we need to consider that and to try and incentivize our various departments to think along those lines. Over to you.
Again, I don't have the kind of answer off the top of my head, but again, I think it's a fair challenge. There's clearly a, you know, we've had to be upfront with people that, given our budget situation, we're going to have to maximise the income we get from fees and charges. That's a huge part of any council's budget. But I agree, there are potentially opportunities to look at kind of innovation and commercial. So fair challenge, that might be something we pick up through the review process rather than having a specific KPI, but we'll look at it. Okay.
Thank you very much. Councillor Price.
Just picking up on the point that Councillor Howard said, I always get a bit nervous when things are maximised, and I much prefer people to look at optimise, because maximise means you might be ignoring all the other things that could badly affect it, because you're just going to go for the maximum amount of money come what may. So I'd just like to caution that word. And then the other thing about this is that I'm assuming that the aim 1 actually takes priority over all the other aims, because if we haven't got aim 1 secured, we can't deliver the others. And if resources are tight, is there a ranking order of the other aims in comparison to aim 1?
Can I just add to that as well? Maybe it's something we should have picked up in the general stuff, but essentially what you're talking about there is dependencies, aren't you? In that all these aims and objectives and priorities can't exist in isolation, because one will impact the other. And yeah, like your point here, aim 1 feels like, we talked about it at the start, it's kind of underpinned anything that goes on before that. Stephen, I don't know if you wanted to talk to that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's put as aim 1 for a reason, because as you say, if we don't get that right, then essentially our ability to achieve any of the other aims is significantly reduced. I wouldn't want to rank them, because clearly, you know, children and young people, and well, all of the aims are very important. But I guess we've both in terms of internally to our colleagues and my colleagues and the colleagues I'm responsible for, and externally to the people of the borough and to councillors, the financial situation is very, very difficult, and we've got to really put that front and centre, which is why it's number 1 in the plan. But I wouldn't kind of rank them in order of importance, only to say that actually if we don't get the finances right, then the consequences are significant.
Thank you, Stephen. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just referring to the transformation programme, just wondered if could just get some clarity over how that will be reported, because I know that there are KPIs for the percentage of savings. What would be quite interesting is to actually see, in that sense, the savings that come from the transformation programme itself, and then the other savings. So in that sense, almost like a project reporting of the transformation programme would be really good to see that tracking within the whole picture.
Absolutely, we're really clear and committed to making sure we report against that transformation programme publicly. We are putting in place the kind of infrastructure and governance around that. So each directorate will have their own transformation board chaired by the relevant executive director. And then that will come through to a corporate transformation board, which I will chair on a monthly basis. So we will receive reports from the adults transformation, place, resources and children's. We will then report that through to cabinet monthly as part of the monthly budget report. So there'll be a highlight report, if you like, setting out kind of where we are across the programme. And again, I think there'll be an important role for scrutiny, probably through the quarterly performance. I think we're planning to build in an update on delivery against the transformation programme into that quarterly assurance report going forward. So Cabinet and this committee will have a chance to look at that and scrutinise it.
Thank you, that's great.
Councillor Reeves.
Thank you very much. I noticed that we're investing in implementing some new systems. So I mentioned them earlier, Mosaic, Liquid Logic, also a new, another customer relationship management system, and upgrade and update that to under phase 1 to support our public facing website. Have we looked at where these could be either cross-charged or utilised by other boroughs, or is this just solely going to be something that only we can utilise, that's going to be a cost to us, purely a cost, or nothing that we can then develop? I don't know whether we're developing it with the software companies, or and are we improving it in some way bespoke to us that we could then leverage for other councils, and they could then tap into that. And then second of all was, I noticed that there's a lot of talk in here, also mentioned twice, about contract management, and that's one of my favourite topics. And because for me, quite a lot of the services are all contracted, right? So we have to be sophisticated in the way that we deal with contract management and procurement, and evolve that to get the best value. That's part of our aim, right? To get the best value for money, including in sourcing. And the thing that I didn't see was any kind of measurement. It's all, yes, we're going to recruit and resource 2 new posts. That will obviously have an impact, and that will be a benefit. But it's more than that. There's how quickly can we contract? How effectively do we contract? Also, can we measure the value in extracting the value from the contracts? If they didn't deliver on the contracts, that we've actually then gone out and leveraged our terms within the contract. So there's lots and lots of areas where you can show performance, and also it will help us in the future learn about how we can then evolve it. Because I think we're right at the beginning of a new era of contract management and procurement. But to be able to do that, you can't just implement, you have to then look back at it and then evolve again. And it's a circular thing. I can't see any KPIs or any measurements, just a statement of that. So I'm wondering if you could comment on that, please.
On the first point about the systems, I mean, primarily this is about efficiency for us as an organisation. So the example I would give you is adult social care. Currently, we're on a system called Paris, which we are one of the few local authorities that still uses that system. It's very outdated. And RBWM and Optilis have different systems, and we do a lot of kind of transactions via spreadsheets. So this is the architecture I've inherited as head of Chief's paid service and new administration. So we've got to focus on sorting that out. So having a system which both Optilis and RBWM can use, it will be a cost, but actually it will be a benefit, because it will allow us to bill more effectively, to ensure that our care packages we're tracking it, and basically the management data. So primarily, whether it's Mosaic for adults or Liquid Logic for children, or the new CRM, it's to make ourselves a more efficient organisation. Clearly, again, if there are opportunities to look at how we can do this in partnership with other authorities, we do talk to other authorities about how to implement these systems, because they are complex implementation plans. So we do, we are open with other colleagues who have kind of done this before. Your point about contract management, again, there's a kind of that balance to be struck between how much we put in here. It's in here referenced as a headline because improving contract management is important, but actually what I think we need to work towards is a procurement plan and a contract management plan, which is a kind of standalone document, which again supplements this, rather than building too much in here, because it is a work in progress, let's say, but we understand the importance of it.
Yeah. The detail from else, like having it as a separate document, I think that's a great idea. What would be good is when we look at this again, or we can look at maybe having some sort of a singular measure, something that then shows that plan is working. Do you see what I mean? That we can have lots and lots of detail in that other separate plan, but for it to then funnel up into here and give us something to be able to measure it. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Reeves. Councillor Teasing.
Thank you, Chair. So obviously on finance, we've had a lot of discussions in this and other meetings. So I don't want to go over things that we've gone over before many times, except to say, obviously on the very first one, it's clear that, you know, everything, the process is established, and we know that we are already established the main things that we need to do to try to improve the scrutiny, the forecasting and monitoring the budget. I have two questions, however. One is about a couple of the activities that are due to happen soon or coming up soon. So on page 35 of the main pack, or page 11 of the council plan, the first one, if you like, on 1.2, if you might call it, which is about the transformation plan, which is to be established by April 2024. Obviously, that is imminent. Just wonder if we can clarify how close we are on that. Is that nearly there? Is that nearly ready to run? And also on I mean, I'm aware the June one about contract management. I'm aware. Oh yes, how is the recruitment of the procurement and contract management? How is that going? I'm less worried about those two. So that's the first question. So I suppose, where are we with those 2 points? And then the second point is really on the KPIs. So the KPIs, page 37 or page 13 of the council plan. Now, I think these are all entirely reasonable. I really like the fact on the revenues that we have, if you like, tough, specific but realistic targets. For example, on council tax collected, we're targeting 98.5, I think, which is, previously we were saying 99% or 99.5, which was idealistic and not realistic. So it is good. Obviously, the more the better. So that's good. My question, I suppose, is on the first two, which is about one small point where you say smaller is better. I presume it means smaller adverse variance is better, because presumably if we get a variant, if we're ahead of budget, but it's a big budget, a big variance, but it's a favourable variance, obviously that's good. So obviously just clarify that. But can I just clarify the granularity of this? Because this, I think, needs to be done. I presume it will be, but again, can you clarify that this will be done at a directorate level, and ideally at a reasonably low level, so that we can actually track what we can do about the things that we can control, etc., etc.
Yes, Elizabeth, I think. So I might bring her in on where we are with the procurement recruitment and your other point about the granularity. In terms of the transformation program, yes. So the individual, as I was saying in response to Councillor Wilson, the individual directorate boards are now up and running. We are recruiting a number of additional project and program managers to support that, and the corporate transformation board, which I will chair, the first meeting of that will be on the 1st of May. So to give every of the individual boards the chance to meet, we'll have that first meeting of that board on the 1st of May. So that is in place, and that is up and running. If Elizabeth is online, I might bring her in on the other points.
Thank you. So in terms of the recruitment for procurement, so Lynn Hitchinson, who is our head of procurement, has been having meetings with HR to draft job specs. So that happened some weeks ago, and she's been working with Namrita, whose name you may have heard before. She's been helping us out with recruitment the last couple of months incredibly effectively in terms of finding us new avenues to go down to advertise roles and coordinating the work that we're doing. In terms of actually going out for the recruitment, what we've done is we've added 2 temps to the procurement team in the interim. So one started on the 18th of March. One is due to start on the 2nd of April. And the plan then is that once Lynn has got those temps in place and up to speed, that will allow her enough breathing space, if you like, to go out and do the procurement for the permanent roles. Because with such a small team, as I'm sure Stephen's mentioned on many occasions, the procurement team is just too small. And with such a small team and so many draws on her time, it's just not possible for her to stop and do a great big procurement exercise to get an additional couple of people in. So having the temps in place will allow her enough breathing space to do that, if that makes sense. So it's all in train. It's all very positive. The job specs are done. The plan is in place. Namrita's supporting on finding routes to market, if you like, to go out and get those people. And when those temps are in place, Lynn will be able to have the time to go and do that. And in terms,
sorry, Elizabeth, I was going to suggest you probably want to talk to the reporting question as well.
Yes. So in terms of the granularity of reporting, I think it's, if I say it's like it's an iterative process, I appreciate that kind of sounds a little bit wishy-washy, but it's not really. We are planning on reporting on the savings, reporting on the savings connected to the transformation. We are planning on, as Stephen says, reporting on the transformation. What I expect will happen though is we'll come out with some initial dashboards and we'll put those as part of the monthly finance report, and we'll get feedback and people may be completely happy with them on day one. I doubt that, but you know, we'll put out a set of reports that we feel are informative. And I think if you've seen the progression in the finance reports over the last few months, I think we have aimed to be informative. So I'm confident that we can put out something highly acceptable as a first bash at it, and then we'll see where we go from there. It is actually quite tricky to report on because some of these savings are actually, if you like, costs foregone. So, you know, we're planning on spending less in some budgets next year. That was what was in the budget plan, which obviously we know that we need to report on and we need to keep track of, but it's something we are thinking about quite hard in the finance team at the moment, because it's, you know, it's quite hard to report on what you haven't spent, if you like. But yeah, we're working up some dashboards just now, so we certainly will be aiming to deliver the granularity and the clarity.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just looking at there's talk about the priority deliverables, minutely adjusted. Now, we've got a list of priority deliverables on the strategic priorities. Are they like aim 4? Under aim 4? Are they, the first one is the most priority, or does it work for all the sections under the deliverables? And also, these are, some processes have been established, but we don't know how well they're going at the moment. So I would appreciate an update on those that have been established, and the costings as well. There's no costings for these deliverables. They do say they'll be minutely adjusted, but that's all. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No, thank you. So just to take those questions in order. So the list of deliverables with under each priority are not then further prioritised, if you see what I mean. So the first one isn't the top priority. They're really there to give a snapshot of the activities that we are undertaking to deliver each of those strategic priorities, and they're particularly focused on the coming financial year. So they will be updated on an annual basis to reflect you know, the progress that we've made in achieving those, and the further activities and deliverables that we'll be focusing on kind of moving forwards as we go through the 4 years of the plan. Where we have, and actually deliberated the best way to phrase the process established for those deliverables where we've already made progress and where they're ongoing activities, how to frame that best. So the process established means that basically we're already undertaking that work. It's already got going. Within this council plan and the technical appendix, we are not reporting on how those things are going. That will be included within the quarterly assurance report, which then gives a quarterly update on how we're progressing against those key deliverables. And then in the annual report, which gives the overall summary of progress over the first year of the plan.
So just to clarify on that then, within this document where we're seeing process already established, essentially what you're doing is highlighting new measures versus existing measures, not the actual measurement itself, more of a, this is what we will measure, whether or not it's a new thing we're tracking.
So just to clarify, so that process established is for the deliverables rather than the metrics, but yes, exactly. Thanks.
Just on that, so many of the a lot of the kind of governance changes to try and improve our scrutiny of the budget have been established for many months because of, you know, there were quite obvious gaps to me when I came in. So, but they contribute to us trying to achieve that aim. So I think we're trying to say that the process is in place and it's ongoing, and we will again continue to look at how if that needs to be refreshed. But I guess it's to give you assurance that some of these things are actually already in place. We're not waiting until council adopts the plan to improve our governance around the budget, because that just wouldn't be appropriate.
Thank you very much. It looks to me like we can move on to the second aim now. So the second aim is a clean, green, safe and prosperous borough. So we'll go to Councillor Howard first.
That's with my pressing finger today. I would like to take us to the strategic priority, support our local economy, working with businesses on this. I see a lot of discussion there about partnerships with local businesses. Brilliant idea, obvious. Helps us develop the services they require, the facilities, the infrastructure that they need to survive and to prosper. But when I look at the KPIs which are attached to that, I look down at percentage of working age people in employment and the opposite, unemployed. Don't really see that as a measure of building relationships with local businesses, or even building successful relationships. So I don't see the linkage between the two, except at a very high level. And if we are talking about employment and just measuring employment, then maybe we need to change the strategic aim. So basically they don't seem to fit together. So could we have a look at either, well, I presume changing the KPI is a lot easier than changing the other one. So if we could have a more appropriate KPI for that particular issue, please.
Yeah, it is quite difficult to identify a metric on the quality of our relationships with business, but it's a fair challenge. There are proxies for that you can use. We have had that type of metric in previous frameworks, and so if that might be something that you would like to make as a recommendation as the panel.
I don't think. Well, what I think we need is something more qualitative rather than quantitative. I think is that when we're building memorandums of understanding with local businesses, it would be an opportunity to be actually touching base with the, shall we say, the key decision makers in the larger employers in the borough, or maybe even in 2 or 3 centres, just to get that idea of, do they think we're doing the right thing, the wrong thing, or somewhere in the middle, which is most likely. So I don't think you're going to be able to get a number. It's going to be interpretation. I think it would also help on the fact that when we were talking about engagement, we found it very difficult to get these people to come along and talk because they didn't see what was in it for them. This gives them that answer.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Some of the KPIs under the targets, as I see it, we've got three different types. We've got an actual number, we've got baselining, and then we have track and report. So it's just understanding, is baselining because at the moment we don't know what that measurement is, so we've got to establish what that measurement is first before we can then say, right, now we improve on that.
Exactly, it's
right.
the new metrics.
And then I can understand you've got a figure for target and you're looking to improve that, but then what's track and report if that's not baselining and finding out what it is and then doing better?
So to take an example, say, sorry, I'm looking at aim for it, but anyway, for say the number of children in households of MARAT referrals, which is measuring domestic abuse. It's not baselining because we do have the trends, we've got historic data on that. We wouldn't want to set a target on that, partly because in domestic violence, that's a particularly kind of complex one because you want people to report it. Obviously, you don't want it to become more prevalent, but you do want people to report it when it happens. So actually, there are in some cases where it would be a success if the numbers have gone up because more people are reporting. There are, but then over a long term, you'd want the numbers to be coming down. So we wouldn't want to set a target of the numbers, but we do want to track and monitor what's happening to it. There are other metrics, and I'm just finding an example where we say bigger is better. So for example, the percentage of working age people in employment, we have limited control over that as a council. So we probably wouldn't want to hold ourselves to a specific target, but clearly we want to be tracking and reporting and looking at the reasons why those figures might be going up or down.
Then I have a very specific question, which is environment, health and trading standards. Percentage of food business broadly food law to be over 80%. And I think of food law as being food hygiene. And I think, oh gosh, we're just saying 20% of premises cannot be acceptable because we're saying 80% is acceptable. Have I misunderstood that?
I will double check that, but my understanding is that is because that's a stretch target from where we are now. So it's an improvement. But I'll get back to you with the exact definition because I'm not an expert.
Thank you.
Let me see if my colleague.
Thank you very much. Councillor Teasey.
Thank you, Chair. Just one point actually on the first aim, keeping our neighbourhoods clean and safe, and the last sort of bullet point, as it were, the last target, which was deliver an improved enforcement policy for businesses to enable light touch, right touch enforcement along with civil penalties aimed to prioritise risk, blah, blah, blah. I've read that and I've read that and I've reread that, and it doesn't really mean anything to me. I don't, when I look at that, that could mean, do we want to do more regulation? Do we want to enforce more? Do we want to enforce less? I'm not quite clear. And when I look at the KPIs, again, I can't really see anything that sort of tells me what we're trying to do there. So I just want to question that. I mean, look, if maybe we're actually saying, look, we want to really go, we want more enforcement over repeat offenders and those who target the vulnerable, then that's fine, and maybe that could be clearer. I'm not quite sure the answer here, or if there is a KPI that might be applicable, but that just, the way it reads at the moment, it doesn't, to me, it doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah, I mean, again, helpful to have that challenge, because I've probably read that about 28 times in getting to this point. But if it doesn't read clearly to you, then it's not going to read clearly to our residents. So we can we can look at how we can make that a bit plainer English. I think what we're trying to say is, again, kind of we don't have the capacity to do everything, but we know through our partnerships with the police, through our CCTV in our major towns, that actually, when it regards something like shoplifting, there are a handful of kind of repeat offenders where we've got partnerships working with the police, and we work really well. And I guess it's kind of that approach. But I take your challenge, and I think we will aim to take that one back and maybe make it a bit plainer English before it goes to council.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a few observations on the aims here. Firstly, the references to sustainable transport are very much welcome, and also recycling. And I think we've discussed that in a previous meeting, so that's very good to see the percentage of household waste being recycled being tracked. And also referencing the grass cutting, again, bit of a theme in recent times. That target being more than 89%, that seems quite a good number. I don't know what the actual percentage was last year, but I'm pretty sure it was nowhere near that. So those all seem very good. Just a couple of points to pick up. As Councillor Price mentioned, the food law one, I'd like to specifically ask what the broadly means. So as well as the actual percentage, what does broadly mean in that context? Just possibly need a bit of education around food law, but yeah. And then also on the bins missed, so the collections, 60 per 100,000, obviously that is a small percentage, but I know for every resident who has their bin missed, it is a frustration, and it is a sort of a source of negative feedback with the council. So I just question whether that 60 could be sort of tweaked a bit. I appreciate that is a challenging process. Yeah, so just those 2 points.
So on the food businesses, the definition is the number of broadly compliant food business establishments expressed as a percentage of the total number of businesses operating. So broadly compliant means their compliance levels have been assessed as food hygiene rating of 3, 4 or 5. Okay. So those pictures you see outside restaurants at their most recent food hygiene inspection. Okay. We may add that definition actually, because I think broadly is a bit confusing. The bins missed target is the one set in the contract.
Right.
Although we are actually doing better than that at the moment. We're actually performing really well.
And again, I would just say again, this is meant to sort of show, whether we have a kind of systematic problem with missed bins, because clearly if it was significantly above that target, we would have to be worried, and we would be into actually, is there a big problem here? But clearly where there are instances of missed bins, then we will investigate those. And as ever, as councillors, people write to me about this. I understand the frustrations, and we always ask the team to investigate. So when the numbers are low, we can investigate. Clearly, if we start to get to a position where the numbers are higher than what's in the contract and what we're comfortable with, then there's potentially some wider issues at play.
Thank you very much. Councillor Reeves.
Thank you very much. Obviously, the main thing about this, well, one of the elements is a clean environment and a greener environment for our residents. One particular KPI I wanted to pick up on is there's one around environmental services revenues, it's called, and it says the percentage of reported fly tipping, hazardous or non-hazardous, instances removed within timescale. So 2 things about that. One, it says environmental services revenues. Well, that's a cost to us every time we go and actually pick up the fly tipping. It's not a revenue, it was impacting our revenue, but it's a cost to us, we have to pay. And that links to my real question is, why is there not a percentage fly tipping prosecution level or actual investigation? Because it's all well and good us going and picking it up every time, but if they keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it, it's going to keep costing us, keep costing us, keep costing us, and we're not going to solve it. And it does happen because I get reports from my residents all the time. There's one particular alleyway or area, and they got fly tipped about 3 times within a few weeks. I went out there, and twice it had addresses in the black bin bags. Did we hear anything about it? Nothing whatsoever. What happened? It fly tipped again, same address. So this is like just repeating and repeating. You know, there's what we should be doing is looking at where we can actually investigate appropriately and prosecute as well. There's no KPI about there. It's just a KPI about us going out and cleaning it on time. I like that. That's good. Yeah, of course we should get out there and get rid of it. But can you please take my point about the fact that we need to actually have something that measures our subsequent performance after that in trying to actually prevent it? It's corrective action, and then we need the preventative action now after that.
Yeah, we'll take that away and look at that.
Thank you. And, oh, sorry.
So just, Councillor Rees, just on that, I guess that's an example of what I was talking about earlier on about measuring the right thing at the right stage of the spectrum, right? You know, I take your point, Becky, it's kind of links to what was before, which was saying about domestic abuse. I know they're completely different topics, but there's one thing that we actually want less reporting of fly tipping, because that means there's less fly tipping. So it's about working out the proxies that sit around some of those behaviours as well. So, yeah,
it's not just that, it's actually getting our costs back, and also it says revenues, like it's the title of that section. That's not really revenue, like I see, unless we prosecute them and actually bring in the fines that we should be doing. So I think there should be more investigation around that. And then the percentage of grass cutting, it says to target, against target. I just wanted to ask, so who's setting these targets? Because, I mean, from my perspective, and probably a lot of the residents, the target didn't seem to correlate to the actual needs of the borough. Because quite often, we've seen this, is that it wasn't cut for a long, long time. Well, if that's the target, then sure, you know, you've met your target, but that's not what people are looking for. You know, when it's encroaching on areas, it's not being cut back quickly enough, you're waiting too late to do it. That could be a target, and then you're meeting it. So I just wanted to ask who's setting the targets, because then I can't, and I think you'll need to take that to place ONS. I think they should look into this, because that's obviously their remit, is the actual target and where it's coming from. And then also about making sure there's an allowance for wilding, because, you know, there are areas, and I think we should promote more and more areas where we don't need to cut it. Actually, we should let it go to wilding and wildflowers. We've got someone in our borough who's really pitching for a verge to go out and, you know, grow wildflowers on them and to let them grow there. And there's lots of areas where they cut it and then the plants never grow back again. So I think that should be taken into account, because actually leaving things and not cutting them could also be something that we look at as well.
So on that, the percentage of grass cut in a timely way, that's part of the metrics from the contract with Tivoli. So that has been negotiated and agreed through that contract, and is part of us managing their performance as well as. Exactly.
Can we put that in there? Can we put 2 contractual targets so that everyone knows that those targets are derived from a contract? Is that okay to ask for?
Yeah, we can add that. Yeah. In terms of the wilding, and in fact, I was at the first project board on Friday of the project we're doing around kind of adopt a verge, which is going really well. Those verges that have been taken over for wildflowers or other areas, as well as verges, those are taken out of the contract with Tivoli, so they're not required to maintain them, so they wouldn't be counted within that target, if you see what I mean. So they wouldn't be penalised for not cutting those.
Right.
Yeah,
maybe.
Definitely. Yeah.
The amount of converted verges, I don't know, based on inquiries to convert them, as you know, that might be a thing, because we're looking for a greener, more biodiverse environment. So why not measure something that's good and positive as well as other elements?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mark, did you just want to make a note? Gary, Councillor Reeves mentioned something about place M&S, because there is a kind of a note on that.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm currently working with the Executive Director of Place and the Assistant Director of Neighbourhood Services to see if we can bring Tivoli contractors for grass cutting to the next Place ONS meeting in April, so that can be picked up as part of that scrutiny review. So yeah, very timely, but we'll pick that up as part of Place.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sharp.
Just following on from some of the things that have been said here, I think we do need to make sure that the measurements that we've got are going to reflect for our residents what we're trying to achieve, and to make sure that we've got a coherent set of measurements which will actually demonstrate to our residents that the council has hit some of these targets, and I'm just not sure that at the moment, even though you talk about proximity and all of that sort of thing, that we've got that yet. And the other thing that was bothering me was that, you know, it's funny, isn't it, how some of these different aims that we've got cross over into different areas. It's all a cohesive sort of whole, really, when you look at what we're trying to achieve in terms of well-being for our residents. And you know, one of the things that we're trying to do is create a healthy environment for people, and yet there are inhibitors which we could solve quite quickly and easily for our residents, which would make it easier for them to enjoy a healthier lifestyle. So such as helping to cut back hedges, overgrown hedges and that sort of thing in the area, to make pavements more accessible so they can walk. I've got a route that local school children use to walk from their school to the local church. That is quite frequently overgrown during the spring and summer months with hedging and that sort of thing, and yet it doesn't get cut back regularly enough to be able to let them walk down the pavement, so they don't do it. So surprisingly, they're not as healthy and fit as they could be. So I think we need to kind of reflect the fact that this is quite cohesive, but also pick out specific targets which actually match what we're looking for. So I'm still not sure that our key performance indicators on this particular item are really in line with what we're trying to achieve. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Howard.
I have to echo that a little bit, but one of the things which I'd like to approach it from a slightly different way is that I would like to see a set of KPIs that residents and officers feel empowered to do things and not be undercut or undermined by people double guessing them. So something that's clear to all parties, something that allows people to make decisions that then they can back up and do things. So I can't see a complete lack of those, but I find that there are some where there is gaps. So I think it's good work. Please keep going. But it's really important to this council and to our councillors that our officers believe that we're behind them, and getting the right KPIs for them to go for is part of that. So thank you for trying so hard so far.
Thank you. Councillor Reeves.
I have one more on the same, because I think oh no, I'm trying to progress it again and say we're going to go on to another aim, but trying to move it along. So aim 2, there was a one I wanted to pick up on, is the housing and rough sleeping one, particularly because I think that's something that's quite overlooked sometimes. And, you know, as I walked into the town hall, there is actually a tent right outside the town hall, you know, so I think that's like really poignant for us to actually look at. So when I looked at it and I said, okay, these are good measurements, percentage successful homelessness prevention activities under the prevention relief duty, number of people sleeping rough, number of households, temporary accommodation located within the borough. Really important because obviously costs to put temporary accommodation outside of the borough, and it should be definitely a huge aim for us. And I think that's where we're going to get efficiencies around costs and other elements, and that's the investment for the future around that. Plus also, you know, it's very much it's very difficult for people to have to go outside of the borough, right? They've established themselves here, or they have friends, or they have support networks here, you know, lots of other things. So it's quite an upheaval, not just the cost, but actually the personal upheaval. But then I looked at the target and it just said track and report. Oh, so what target, what are we trying to achieve here? And are we going to only see what the target is when it comes within the QAR? You know, I'm assuming you'll report it in the QAR, but against what target? Is it because you want to keep it as a variable target based on circumstances for these three items? Can you please explain why we don't have a target and a little bit more about what we're trying to achieve here?
So on each of those three measures, so with the number of people sleeping rough, clearly we want that to be as low as possible. Percentage of households in temporary accommodation that's located within the borough, we want that to be as high as possible. We previously had a target of 50%. We are not meeting that target at the moment for a variety of, because of the pressures on our temporary accommodation and housing. But the majority of the people who are not housed within the borough are housed in Slough. So arguably, if we were a bigger local authority, that, you know, they're not very far away. So we've had quite a few discussions within the service about what level of target we should put in, if any, and the decision was that we should, for this period, track what's happening, clearly with the desire to perform as well as possible on those measures, but not to put in a numerical target at this stage.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's quite difficult, and obviously tracking it is important, and awareness, and actually circulating, you know, being very, very aware of it, because so many people do kind of almost brush this under the carpet. You know, they're the unseen, call them residents, and also probably ones that need most support as well. So I'm glad we're tracking it. I appreciate you saying we haven't met some of the targets, or that the targets you have, it's in discussion at the moment what those targets should be. What I'd really encourage then in that case is that actually that should be discussed in conjunction with a scrutiny, and that actually that's really important for me, is that actually don't just go, please can you not just go ahead and make a target, actually talk through that and bring it to a scrutiny panel and have a really good, robust, clear discussion about what that should be. Because in my opinion, the percentage of people sleeping rough should be 0. And you can get it, I understand there's lots of circumstances around it. If you wanted to ask me what that should be, it should be 0, and that should be our target. However, I think there should be a range. There should be something that allows for people that are transitioning, you know, from sleeping rough because of circumstances, then getting back out of it. And actually we should be measuring how quickly we can get them from that position out of that situation, because that to me is important, right? And trying to deal with that. So can we put that on a scrutiny, you know, for that to be looked at, and for us to actually like set ourselves a target, please?
Yeah, so I think the more important thing to look at is our new homelessness and rough sleeper strategy, which is being developed because the current one is coming to its end, and the world has changed, I think, since the last one. I think local authorities like many local authorities, working in a situation where, you know, we're in a housing crisis, a bit of a perfect storm coming together, with high waiting lists, not enough council homes. Clearly, we don't have our own council homes anymore, and also the pressures on local authorities coming from kind of asylum and migration. So the world has changed. The team are developing a new strategy. We've got a new assistant director who's come in and has spent the first few months developing those relationships with our partners. So local voluntary sector, particularly those organisations which deal with and support people seeking asylum, and many other charities, and looking at things such as winter shelters and other things. So I think that would be something that we'd welcome place Scrutiny looking at, because that is an important strategy for us as an organisation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hunt.
Yes, thank you. I defer to Councillor Reeves' comments on this. Homelessness, there was a lot done, and we should have figures already from last year on the homelessness. And I think I would like to see actual figures, how everything is going. I think that's very important. I think what is important also is to bring in the amount of housing we have, as in John West House, those kind of places, and how much temporary accommodation we have, and whether it's full or not. I presume it's all full anyway, but whether it's full or not, that would help us then to have a good look to see what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think we're going to move on to aim 3, which is the children and young people having a great start in life and access to opportunities through to adulthood. So who would like to kickstart on that? Councillor Teasing.
Thank you, Chair. I really do appreciate that there is an enormous focus in these KPIs and in the targets on those who perhaps, if you like, are have often been left behind. So it's interesting, for example, it's not just about children in care, also about care leavers, and that is a really good thing to see. I really do appreciate that that there is this focus on these, because this is about improving life for everyone. And the priority to me should be, well, who are we doing this for? And who have we not always succeeded on? And we are focusing, and I really appreciate that we are focusing on the people that we have not always supported. And I think I really do like the focus on those about children where domestic violence is involved, children in care obviously as well, children in need, family hubs, health visitors, etc. There is a but, and actually it is, I just think that there is at least one target missing, as it were. And it refers actually to the comments that Councillor Sharp made earlier, which is that I suppose we take for granted that this is a council where generally the schools are very good, but we know that they aren't all. Generally, we do deliver very good percentages who have meet the expected standards, for example. And I just my suggestion, I have a specific suggestion I was trying to come up with. I think on, as it were, what would you call it, 3, where this is aim 3, so 3.3, if that makes sense, which is support all children and young people to achieve meaningful outcomes from birth. This is on page 43 to 44 of our pack, or page 19 to 20, so that one. I think when we look at the specific deliverables, I think they are all about those who are currently disadvantaged, but I think we are missing one about those who are not necessarily disadvantaged, if that makes sense. So, for example, working to improve or maintain attainment at various key stages. I won't write it now. I would expect that it would be owned by Children's Services and Education, obviously, and it's possibly one I would have thought that is already in flight, rather than one that we can put a future date on. So that's in terms of strategic priority. I just think it's important to put it in there. I know we do it already, but it's important to put it in there just to make sure that we keep doing it and that it doesn't, if you like, drop off the radar accidentally. And linked to that specifically, just on the KPIs. So on the KPIs, now we're 46, so page 46 to 47, specifically page 47, which is page 22 of the report, under education and SEND. I think it is good, and we have the percentage of borough schools rated by Ofsted as good, outstanding. I think that's good that that's there, and that is for everyone. That is for everyone. The next one says percentage of pupils meeting expanded in reading, writing, maths at Key Stage 2, brackets disadvantaged. I presume that refers to all of those other things. I think we're missing one almost exactly the same, but not disadvantaged, if that makes sense. And then maybe others, and I will leave, but there's one obvious one that I can possibly think of, which is, again, possibly for both, percentage of pupils meeting not just the expected, but the greater depth standard as well. Now, I know that this is a well-regulated, it's not just the school governors are talking as a school, as a governor of a school that does this very well. Also, allegedly, Ofsted reviews all of this as well. It's good. I think it's important that we put it in there. I know we do it. I really appreciate the focus on those for whom we don't do it at the moment, but I just think we should throw it in there.
Thank you very much. Councillor Reeves.
Thank you very much. So there was, I think it's great, there's some really good stuff in here as well about adopting and participating in the Department of Health's regional care and collaborative pathfinder around foster carers. I think foster carers is something that we've always talked about is needs improving. You know, I know there's foster carers out there that feel that they're not as well supported, and you know, they do an amazing job, foster carers, and they help out so much, and it'd be great. And I think it's really good to say that you're doing, that you're adopting some of these programs and putting them into implementation. So I think that's really good. There was one thing that I was looking at here, which I just wanted to get my head around, if you could explain it to me. It said, develop an in-house registered children's home provision and supported accommodation model for care leavers to meet care needs safely and locally. So it was target completion March 2027. When I read that, I keep thinking we're going to build our own children's home. Am I wrong in that, or is that what it means? Or is it just a provision, as in it's a support provision for them to go into registered children's home? To me, I'm just, if you can explain that to me, that would be great, so I can understand it better. And then there's another thing around care leavers, because I think for me, care leavers is really important. I think it's already been brought up as well, that as they come out of care, I think that's a really important time for them as they transition into adult life and into, you know, being self-sufficient. And it talks about obviously getting them, helping them support, getting housing, their own accommodation. But then I looked at the percentage of care leavers in education, training and employment, but, you know, and we're only trying to achieve greater than or equal to 60%. Really, I think we need more than that, because all of those people that you're trying to support to get their own housing, their own accommodation, to actually live a healthy, independent life, they need to be able to get that education, training and employment, to be able to actually then pay for it, or to, you know, take the cost away from us. That's like early intervention in my books, right? You get them, it's like teaching someone to fish, right? You're not fishing for them, you're teaching them to fish. It's a very simple analogy, but it's the one that came to my head at the time. We don't have many opportunities for fishermen here in the borough. I mean, there is a river, but I wouldn't fish in it. I can tell you that for nothing. I'd probably pull something else out of the river instead. But to me, I think greater than or equal to 60%, I think we need more. We need to do more to help them be self-sufficient and independent. So it's just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, our ambition is really, really high. I guess, like a lot of this, it's about ambition versus what's realistic. And I'm, I think this target will be still challenging to achieve. And we are having conversations with, and I attended the corporate parenting board last week, and we talked about, what can we do as a council to offer work placements for people, young people leaving care, and that's something I want to explore with HR across the core organisation, but also across Optalis and Achieving for Children and our partners. And I know that Lynn Ferguson, our Director for Children's Services, has been out to speak to some of our major employers in the borough about what they can offer care leavers. So ambition is high. I think this is a target which, you're probably looking at this and going, why are we not being ambitious? I think there's a realism point, but I think Becky might want to come in on that to see how we compare.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It doesn't sound high, but actually we've just increased that target from 50 to 60%. So the England percentage is 56 overall. So we're setting ourselves above that and above the South East figure, above the statistical neighbours, above what we're currently at. So although it doesn't sound ambitious, it is a stretch target.
So I appreciate, that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
To try and push you, and I appreciate you're trying to push yourself. So thank you very much.
I guess that's an example of where that shift metric is quite interesting, because if the current performance is 10% and we're targeting 60, you can see it's quite ambitious. If it's a 2-point rise, then it might not be that ambitious. So, okay, thank you, Councillor Rees. Councillor Price.
Thank you. It was sparked off by something Councillor Teasey said, so it may be in here and I've missed it, but it's just for children to continue lifelong education and training. Is there a measure to make sure that people don't think when they leave school, that's it? That we are encouraging the continual lifelong education and training from post-18 onwards? Is there something in there? Because that will help our economy, it'll help the individuals cope with all the changes that are faced during their working life.
So there is for care leavers. I mean, I would push back a little on that I guess, except for groups that are disadvantaged, that's not something that we are actively putting resource into in the council at the moment.
And to see what it is, because if you look at the economy bit, we want people to be educated and continually retrained. Yeah.
I mean, then there may well be an opportunity coming our way, and I think at the last council meeting you agreed the establishment of the Berkshire Prosperity Board, and as part of those areas of the country that have got devolution deals, adult social care budgets have been devolved as part of that devolution. So I think going forward, and I think there may well be plans looking at, whether that's going to be devolved to local areas regardless of devolution deals. So I think there's an opportunity coming our way potentially if that does happen. At the moment, we don't really have the resources to do that, but I think it's an opportunity going ahead with the Berkshire Prosperity Board, and also specifically if we do get control over some of the resources that could make that happen.
Thank you, Councillor Howard.
Just linking two of the KPIs here with an idea. In my village, we're finding that a lot of people are coming in to the good schools, being driven quite a long way. We're also finding that, shall we say, the people who are possibly less aware of the system, which I would possibly say are those in your KPI, which may be tied into the health visitor 75%, with 2.5, that opportunity there to actually inform people about how to go about applying for your local school would be a really good idea. Also would help us to reduce the amount of people we're both paying for to move between schools and traffic from people who are just doing it themselves. Because we are finding that some people just don't know.
Thank you. Councillor Reeves.
So I realised I didn't acknowledge what a great idea just came out from that Stephen came up with. I just wanted to highlight it amongst everything that was said. Is he said about encouraging like care leavers to actually, you know, to come and join the council, to come and actually work for the services that we have, you know. And I think to me that's that corporate parenting saying, come and join the family business. Right? I mean, it's to me, I just wanted to acknowledge it. It's a great idea, and I like it because then they're giving back to the us and to the public that have helped, you know, them as well. So I didn't want it to just be brushed over. So it was a really good idea. Thank you for that.
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. The aim here is children and young people have a great start in life and access to opportunities through to adulthood. I've got a question. How many children are there in the borough who are participating in our standard state school system, which is what we're talking about here? So I just want to understand how many children there are here. And then my second question is, how many children are we talking about in the sort of in need area, so need help in their education? Some of them will be in special send areas, some of them will be in care. So I'm just trying to get an idea of the scale of all of this, because what we're mainly focusing on in our aims here are focusing on not the vast majority of children who are in our school system, but we seem to be focusing on a very narrow range of children. And I am really concerned that whilst the people who need help absolutely do need help and we should be there to support them, but we should absolutely as well be there to support and stretch those children who are in the normal education system, going through and trying to achieve what they are trying to achieve to get the best out of their lives through the normal state school system. And I can't see anything here, and I think we really should have something in here which indicates that we're trying to improve the educational results of the majority of children who are in that state school system, because it's actually really important in terms of social mobility that we don't pull those good children who are going through that system down because we're focusing on the bottom end of the scale, if you like, the educational attainment skill, and focusing teachers and carers on that level, rather than focusing on the really important children who are going through the system and really need just a bit of a hand up, help with some homework for whatever reason, and who, with a bit of a push, could achieve so much more. And we seem to be totally missing that. And I can't see anything in here which indicates that we're helping improve the lot of the majority of children who are going through our very good state school system. You know, we've got most of the schools, 93% or whatever it is, are rated good or excellent. And I haven't seen any of our aims which indicate that we're supporting improving those schools which are labelled good and make them excellent. So I think it's really important that we don't lose sight of the vast majority of children going through that system, and that we're benefiting them as well as the few who are at the bottom end of the educational attainment scale.
So, my response to that is, you know, if you've read the document through for the first time and you're not getting a sense around aspiration and us as an authority working in partnership with our schools to support them to be as good and outstanding as they can be, then I think that is a fair challenge, and we will look to reread the document to see if that can come through more strongly, is the first point, because we are, as I said, we are immensely proud of our schools, and that's something that we want to keep hold of, and there is a report coming to Cabinet in the next few meetings which sets out more of the things that we're doing, but also goes into some of those areas where we need to improve and what we're doing about that, and recognizing what our role in that system is versus what the schools have to play. So I take that challenge, and we can read it through again and just make sure that actually we're looking at aspiration across the piece. I guess my second response to that challenge is our statutory duties rest with what's in here, and we do have a clear mandate and moral commitment to support those young people who have we talk about having good chances in life, who've had the worst possible chances in life, and in some cases been abandoned, and we are the corporate parents of 150 children who are in our care. I don't have the kind of wider figures around edge of care. So for me, it's really important that as a set of statutory and moral duties, it comes out strongly in this document. That's what Ofsted focus a lot of their efforts on. But I take the challenge, and we want to make sure that it's a document that reflects the kind of the excellence of our education system, but also reflects our really important statutory duties around supporting and protecting those young people who, if it weren't for us as an authority, they would be left to fend for themselves. So I'm accepting your challenge, and we will have a look at it.
Because I agree with that, but I think if the report stays written as it is, I think you're relegating the council to be a very marginalised organisation dealing with only a very few people in the borough, relatively very few children on this particular area, because there are only relatively few children, very fortunately, who need a lot of extra help. And I think we need to bear in mind that the population out there with parents with children are wanting their children to have excellent opportunities in the schools that we have, and we need to make sure that we're seen to be supporting them, even though it's not a statutory duty. We need to ensure that those educational establishments are kept at a very, very high standard for the benefit of the parents in the area. And yeah, I can see that we need to support others, but I think we need to also keep a focus on all of those parents whose children are just going through the process in the normal way that we all did, and that we have an excellent education system for the children.
Yeah, we do, and I think we're saying it's not coming out strongly enough in the document. We'll look at that.
Thank you very much. We are on to 4 of 5, so just keeping an eye on time. I know it's a big document, so lots of questions. Aim 4, this is people live healthy and independent lives in supportive communities. So Councillor Price to kick us off on that aim.
Yes, it's to do with equalities. I think that's the right one, isn't it? I haven't skipped an aim, have I? Aim 4? Yes,
no,
aim
it.
4, yes. Council-wide focus on increasing healthy life expectancy, improving wellbeing and reducing the impact of equalities. And then the deliverables are all health related. And I expected is something about moving people out of deprivation. And so I know the different factors that make up the deprivation indices, and how somehow should they be the targets of how we can improve or reduce the number of people living in deprivation. So it's the qualities that I was concerned about.
Do you want me to come in on this? So I think there are deliverables right across the strategic priorities around kind of housing inequality, as we've just in this previous conversation. There's very strong focus around kind of educational outcomes inequality in the plan. So it is woven all the way through, particularly on economic disadvantage and poverty. We have a specific deliverable around the cost of living, but I take your point that we could be stronger on the work that we're doing more broadly, not just on cost of living, but to support residents to maximise their incomes, for example, through financial inclusion officers, both within our customer services, also within housing and some of our housing provider partners. And so we could potentially add some stronger terms on that.
And I think you might be doing yourself an injustice with everything that you are doing, that's not reflected in aim 4 when it comes to the deliverables. So you might be selling yourself short. So yes, if there could be something to reflect what you actually are doing.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Just referring to the objective, which is on page 23 of the pack and 47 total. The final one, increasing access and opportunities for residents to be physically active, part of daily life, sport, leisure, active travel, etc. Which I think is a very worthy objective, and I think this has huge benefit both physically and emotionally for mental health and everything. So very supportive of this. And I guess I'm just looking at the KPIs, and the only one I can link in is the percentage of the number of attendances at leisure centres. I just wondered if there's a slightly wider view we can take there that actually kind of might reflect wider work that we do. So, for example, possibly membership of sports clubs, because I know I'm in touch with the people that use Home Park in Windsor, where there have previously been some maintenance issues, and there's sort of the rugby club have 500 people, the cricket club have 300 people, something like that. It's large numbers, and the health and if those clubs can thrive, then for me it feeds into that aim. So I just wonder if there's other ways of tracking beyond just the attendance at our leisure centres that would be reasonable within the council's remit.
Thank you very much. Councillor Howard.
I would like to go down to adult social care, especially of older people, 65 and over. One of the things which I would like to see reflected is how we are looking at partnering with other funders of older people care. And the reason this has come to my attention is an elderly person in my ward was promised funds by the NHS, but the council did not follow it through, and ended up paying the bill as far as we can see. So don't particularly want to go into the detail of it, but I would love to be understanding how and see how we're driving other parts of the state and individuals to pay their share as they've promised to do.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, and it's something that I was at an event in the middle of last week on this, not particularly on social care integration, and many peers talking precisely about that, where it feels like, during the pandemic, it felt to me like the public sector had come together really and broken down silos to put kind of vulnerable people at the centre. And for whatever reason, we've kind of retreated back into silos to a degree, and I think that's a missed opportunity. I think there is an issue with councils ensuring that they are getting contributions from other parts of the sector, particularly health, around care costs, and that's something that we need to look at. Are we being firm enough on that? And that is a picture across many other local authorities. Some local authorities are taking or threatening legal action with their health counterparts locally. I really don't want to get go down that road where we are, and we've got good relationships with them, but it kind of just shows you the intensity with what these discussions and this is having across the sector. And we have to recognise that ICBs are having to make 30% reductions to their headcount, so they are similarly really financially stretched. The difference being it's not a level playing field, because local authorities can go bankrupt and are indeed allowed to go bankrupt, and the consequences for local people when that happens is significant. NHS trusts cannot go bankrupt, so it is not a level playing field, but we do need to look at making sure that we are clear about what costs fall to us and what costs fall to other parts of the system, and making sure that we are firm on collecting what is due to cover that care.
With you on the firm and fair. I think also it's a little bit of education, because what seemed to have happened in this case was that a promise was made by the NHS to fund money and it was never followed through. So I think education of our officers as well, that not to look a gift horse in the face, really.
Thank you very much. Councillor Reeves.
There's just one thing in here. It says one of the deliverables, explore options and potential risk return of working with Optalis to provide a council-owned and run nursing home, catering for the most complex level of care needs. I can obviously see the huge benefits in doing that, in obviously the costs and the initial investment, and therefore we'll get also a return, and it's being smart with our investments to then bring in future income. I had a target completion date November 2024. The only thing I was missing from there is also it's exploring options, but also then bringing it to someone, like bringing it to, like, I presume that would be probably place, or is it people? ONS. So I'd like that as part of a deliverable, is that actually it's not just explored, but it's then shared and looked into in conjunction with ONS and the cabinet lead member, sorry.
Yeah, I think at this stage this would be about developing a business case as to whether this is a viable a viable road we want to go down, because there are potential benefits, there are potential risks as well. So clearly it would be a member decision, and that any business case would go through the relevant scrutiny. So I'm sure it would be something that people scrutiny would want to look at.
Lovely stuff. I think that takes us to the final aim, which is a high-performing council that delivers for the borough. Councillor Price.
So the strategic priority about governance, particularly, it mentions transparency, but when I look at the deliverables, I can't see that any of the deliverables reflect the fact that we want to be a more transparent council. So just want to raise that. It's on page 28 of the report. Yeah.
So is that a kind of point there about the KPI? There's almost not a KPI that matches against those deliverables. Okay, so that's something to maybe take away with, that, whether or not we'll crack it here. Anything else, Councillor Price, on that aim? No, lovely. Thank you very much. Councillor Reeves.
Yeah, so within there's one, it says about strengthening how we work to serve the borough better, placing borough at heart of communities, listening to people and involving them in decision making. I looked through all 5 of these and I couldn't see anything about consultations and better consultations. We've had a number of consultations recently about a number of subjects, and it's been criticised on a number of occasions, not just by the public, but also by elected members as well. I can go back to a recent full council meeting where exactly that was talked about, and about consultation being, the timing of it has to be better to allow us to have time to review and to what I would say truly involve and listen to the people, and when they express their views. But I couldn't see, maybe I'm missing something, but I couldn't see about the consultation element.
That is in there actually, although I concede it could be numbered better. So the strengthen how we work to serve the borough better, the second deliverable on there is around embedding and building on what the progress we've already made in terms of the engagement framework, but then strengthening our approach to public consultation to better promote engagement with underrepresented groups. So yeah, so we do recognise we've still got some way to go to improve on that. And it's very much a priority.
Thank you very much.
It didn't say improve or look for input, but yeah, I take your point. It is mentioned there. It's a very big document. I must have skipped that. So I appreciate it's definitely highlighted there. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just picking up Councillor Price's point about the strategic priority covering governance, transparency and accountability. I would agree that the deliverables feel a bit light, and I wonder what we can add regarding accountability particularly. I mean, the second one around governance and performance management covers accountability, and I kind of think about the accountability from the council to residents in terms of providing services, and in particular the like where that falls down and the residents are using the report it system. That I can't find any mention of that elsewhere here, but I feel that's a very significant piece of interaction that residents have with the council. It's like when something goes wrong, we're channeling them towards the report it system. So I just wonder if there's an opportunity in this section to build something in around that, thinking about the accountability of the council to residents for services, as well as potentially more general accountability, as I say. Sorry, there's kind of two slightly overlapping points there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. I looked through this list of what we're calling strategic goals or aims here, and most of them seem to be pretty tactical, really. They didn't seem to be strategic. They seem to be the sort of things that our residents would expect the council to be doing anyway. So I think what we need to do is, you know, all of those aims can be just struck out of this document. I don't think it means anything to our residents. I think what is really important, though, are the key performance indicators, and make sure that the key performance indicators are actually meaningful to our residents, the people who are using the council services. So just purely by way of random example, you know, we've got customer service, percentage of stage 1 complaints upheld in adults is up to 40%. That seems actually quite a high number to me, and we should have much lower numbers for percentage of complaints that are upheld. We should be looking really for some very high service targets for our services to residents, and we seem to be setting ourselves actually quite a low bar on some of these. So I'd like to see those targets vastly improved so that we can be assured that we're delivering excellent services to our residents. I don't think any of the aims that we've got in here mean anything to our residents, and so therefore we should strike them out, and we should just focus very much on what we're delivering to our residents so that we know that they're getting excellent service when they come to the council.
Go to Councillor Howard first, just a point on that, and then we'll come to you, Stephen.
I would like to comment on this because I think that's a very short-sighted point of view. Our residents are not the only people who are stakeholders in this document. Our officers, our employees, the people who work and even commute into the area are all part of our group. And just because it doesn't match one particular part, you don't go and strike things out. We have to look at our community as a greater amount of people than just the residents. It includes a lot of people. So I do support that a lot of these things are useful. Not necessarily that they're perfect, but they're useful. And the idea that we only singularly focus on the interests of one group is possibly a little limited for the interests of that one group too.
Stephen, did you want to comment?
I was going to make a point about the audience for this is not just our residents. Primarily, you know, they are the kind of priority, but it's also our partners and its staff. So having a strategic priority around kind of empowering the workforce is something that's really important to me as the chief executive, because if you don't have an empowered workforce, then you're not going to be able to deliver anything. So it is important that we reflect on who this document is for. Yes, residents, but also other groups. And then in terms of the targets, and again, we just need to reflect where we are currently as an organisation and where we're going. And I think many of these targets reflect the situation where the kind of the baseline, and I think in most cases here there is a degree of stretch on where we were already, and we have to reflect that with our, you know, the leanness of the organisation, these are kind of realistic, challenging targets based on where we are as an organisation, but with an ambition to go as far as we can.
Thank you, Stephen. Councillor Howard.
Just want to point out that I couldn't see a strategic aim for planning, and there seemed to be 4 or 5 KPIs, but they didn't seem to be reflected in the strategic priorities. And planning is a very emotive subject. It gets a lot of comments, both by residents and many other people. So I think is that it does need to be addressed. And I think also there is an opportunity there to be able to generate revenue by giving a little bit of advice. I know we can't lead too many things, but I do get also a lot of people complaining that they don't really understand the system and would be prepared to pay a little extra to get a little help to understand how to work the system.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. We'll definitely echo Councillor Howard's points about planning applicants being able to sort of interact. I think that the pre-planning process is something that I get feedback that more residents would like to engage with it. I don't know whether there's a way, hopefully there is a way of doing that. Main point I wanted to make was just around the percentage of complaints upheld, which kind of is a reflection of the validity of the complaint. I would also be interested in like the volume of complaints, because if you have like 5 complaints and they're all valid, and they're all upheld, then that's 100%. Whereas if you have like 1,000 complaints and 150 are valid, you've got a whole different. So yeah, so the volume of complaints would be quite interesting to me as well. Just happy to leave that with you.
Lovely, thank you very much. Good point, Councillor Wilson. I think that's everyone on my list. So thanks for that. I know that was a bit of a doozy of an agenda item. That one is a big one, but an important one because it sets the tone for the rest of the year. So it's important we get it right. One thing I'm going to just make the point and not expect any answer on it, but I think one of the things that's going to be really important going forward is communication of this to the public, to people outside this room, to residents. But equally, how we're performing against that. I know we've talked about that in this forum before about the publishing of KPIs and tracking of those. So I think that'll be an important thing we look at once this has gone through the process. Mark, did you want to just touch a little bit on what the next few days look like leading up into the Cabinet?
Yep, so we've had a discussion tonight. We'll move in a second to focus on the recommendations that we formally want to put forward to Cabinet. But the minutes of the discussion tonight will go forward to Cabinet as a supplement. So that'll be published by end of the day tomorrow. And it'll give Cabinet a day to have a look at what we discussed tonight, the points you've raised, and those recommendations, which I hope we're going to come to an agreement on shortly. So that will go out tomorrow by the end of today.
Lovely, thank you. Now, it's going to be a very difficult process of coming up with a succinct series of recommendations because there's been a lot of notes down. So I suggest, I've got some notes, Mark's made some notes about each of the specific aims, which we'll endeavour to capture. But my feeling is generally that there was some questions around clarity of KPI/deliverable, which we'll have to go through. So I'm sort of thinking more of themes. So there was elements of clarity. There were certainly a few occasions where we're looking at targets and maybe missing some context about where we were versus where we aim to be. And there was some stuff around dependencies. I wonder, Mark, if it's possible for this group to see that document as soon as it's ready. Will we have time scheduled for that?
The only difficulty of that is that I'd have to draft a full discussion, which is going to take up most of tomorrow, and it wouldn't give us much time to put something forward for cabinet. So I think we'd need to come up in this meeting now with sort of, like we did with the budget, we had the discussion, we came up with sort of 3 or 4 points that we all agreed on as a panel. We were happy to put forward clearly to cabinet, and then we could have that response from cabinet when they considered the corporate plan on Wednesday, and sort of acknowledged those recommendations which have been made by Scrutiny, and whether they want to accept those or not. So I think it probably makes sense if we open up to the panel and see if there are recommendations that they'd like to put forward, and we can have a discussion on it and see if we can agree.
Stephen, did you want to make a point there?
Well, I guess it'll be up to the committee to determine what you want to kind of move into recommendations. Some of the things that, so there are a lot of kind of drafting points which I think we can take away and hopefully just update. You don't need to kind of reflect on kind of different KPIs. Again, we will reflect on all of those. I guess there again, trying to keep the balance between this being quite a pithy document and not turning it into a massively bigger document, which then creates huge, bureaucracies in terms of reporting. So if you trust us to try and get that balance right, some of the themes which came out for me where I think there was something around procurement and contract management about how we can reflect a bit more about that in the document. There was something about business relationships, which I think was a good point. There was a KPI about incidents of fly tipping as opposed to just cleaning it up. Schools, I think, came out as quite an important theme around the balance between, the kind of wider support to schools to ensure that they're as good as they can be versus our duties around supporting children most in need. I thought that was a theme. I think the challenge around equalities was a good and accepted one around, it's not just about health inequalities and transparency. And there was also something about accountability to residents for services. So if that's helpful, those are the themes that I picked up, but I'm sure others will have got some others.
Does anyone want to add to those themes that I've suggested for you, Stephen suggested to you? Is any that we've missed, do you think?
I don't know if it was your notes, the fly tipping one. It was about inspecting the cause, rather, I think you said incidents, number of incidents, but it's more like the prosecutions and inspection of the cause of the fly tipping and getting something around that, or getting better at trying to do that when it's possible. So that was just for clarity.
Councillor Teasey, you look like you're wanting to say something but not present.
I mean, just in light of time and the fact that we did go through these in some depth.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure the benefit of trying to recap everything that we've just said in the last 2 hours now, given that we've been through them in some depth already. And I think our positions have been very clear, and where we've made recommendations, I mean, this is recorded. I just don't see the benefit of doing this, sorry.
Just the only thing I'd say on that is, as a scrutiny panel, we'd like to put forward something so that cabinet can respond to that and either accept or decline to include sort of a recommendation in the council plan they're going to agree on Wednesday. We've had the discussion and that will be noted by cabinet, but in terms of what they want to take forward and not take forward from that, if we had a couple of things we clearly said to cabinet, we want you to consider these, it would just help cabinet be very clear on what we would like to prioritise in terms of seeing as a panel. That's what I'm more
made, and I think those, rather than trying to remember them all, I just think, I mean, interestingly, I was the one where I was trying to be very, very specific on 3.3, add something here, in fact that KPI and that KPI. Actually then I didn't get a response to that immediately, but I presume it was noted, so because I think we went on to something else, so I'll throw that in, but I presume it's all in.
It's a difficult one. I mean, the recommendation that springs to mind is read our feedback and take a view. Councillor Price, you've
TC said is that for me now to remember all those important things in 2 hours when we've been doing so much, and I would trust that, you know, Mark has captured that, and that if it's possible that he can have 20 minutes of your time tomorrow to give it to you to say, yeah, that's fine. I would trust that to happen. And we actually have the fallback that on Wednesday at the cabinet, if we just say, oops, that wasn't right, or something was left off, we can pop it in.
Anything to add to that, Councillor Howard?
I'm a little astonished that we come to this at the end. If we only wanted to come up with 4 broad points, we should have agendaed around coming up with 4 broad points. We have spent 2 hours going through quite a lot of detail, and to find this out at the end seems a little bit pointless. We could have all been at home and having a nice night's sleep instead. So I would like it to be that the detail that we have put forward gets reflected to the cabinet, however it has to be.
I think that's what we're kind of saying here. So that Mark can certainly have 20 minutes of my time, if not more, Mark, tomorrow to make sure that if the panel's happy for me to do that process with Mark. Thank you very much. Right, thank you very much for all your effort in that, Mark, Councillor Howard, and thanks for coming along and putting that effort in. Right, we'll move on to the next agenda item. I do know it's just checking everyone's comfy and okay, and sort of apologies for the length of time.
We need to do the vote on to continue the meeting. It's 4 minutes to 9:30. It's 4 minutes early, but I'm happy to.
Oh yes, sorry, yes, good point. Let's do that now. So
we've had a long agenda item, and there's still about 4 items left.
Yeah.
So we might as well just do the named vote just to continue. So the motion will be to continue the meeting. I'll just do a quick name vote: for, against, or abstaining on to continue the meeting. Start with Councillor Buckley. Councillor Howard. Councillor Hunt.
Only till 10 o'clock.
So, okay. Councillor Moriarty.
For.
Councillor Price. Councillor Reeves. Councillor Sharp. Councillor Teasey. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Okay, as I discussed, we're going to move slightly on to the just rejig it around and apologize. I know we've got a resident speaker for the budget item, so we did have a conversation prior to the meeting about the order. So if we just move to what was agenda item 6, now 5, Think Family Inequality Project. So this is a verbal update. I think we'll come to you, Becky, for that. And also you've been joined by colleagues, so it might be worth you introducing yourself before we come into that agenda item.
In the Chief Exec's unit, and I'll work with Becky, and I'll be presenting the second half of this presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much. Over to you guys.
Next. So the panel asked for an update on the Inequalities project and Think Family piece of work that's come out of the research phase. So the composition of this panel has changed significantly over the last year, but we did give a couple of updates of the findings of the Inequalities project to Corporate Overview and Scrutiny, so I won't go in to too much detail on that. Mark, if you could flick, I don't think we need to go through this one. So just to give an overview of the borough. So RBWM is a prestigious borough and it's affluent, but there are clusters of disadvantage in particular neighbourhoods. So there are several schools in the borough that have got a proportion of children on free school meals that's 2 or 3 times higher than the average. There are 3 wards where getting on for 10% of residents are in receipt of universal credit. So we see this clustering, although right across the borough there are households facing challenge. Next slide, please. So the overall wealth of the borough creates challenges for those who don't share that wealth. We're one of the most affluent areas of the UK, symbolic by association with the royal family, but that can mean that inequalities are starker. It can mean that disadvantage is hidden, both through the positive outcomes at borough level, so for example, the overall educational outcomes, and also in the way that we talk, think about and visualise the area. So across a number of key indicators, including universal credit, free school meals, fuel poverty, and also our own data from our residents survey, a core of around 5 to 10% of households are struggling seriously financially. Another quarter are just about managing. So the challenges, those facing disadvantage can get hidden. The borough can seem designed for the wealthy, so compared with living in a borough that's overall more disadvantaged, things like public transport can be less well used and so less accessible. Housing is extremely expensive, both rented and bought, and housing is a really key underpinning challenge across large sections of our population, but particularly for the most disadvantaged. And the scale of the gap can lead to feelings of shame and stigma. However, on the other side, we've got a whole host of willing residents who can and do volunteer, donate, and mentor. We've got a wide breadth of formal and informal support groups available, diversity, and of course, in our natural assets, our parks, our rivers, our green spaces, we've got a great place to live. Next slide, please, Mark. So the Inequalities project surfaced as key themes. These kind of domains of poverty and low income, housing, life skills, health and relationships, they can be factored as either risk or protective factors. So if you do have positive outcomes across those 5 areas, that protects you, it makes you more resilient. When you're struggling in one or more of those areas, that makes it harder for you to achieve positive outcomes. And when a resident or a family is experiencing several of these factors, when they're interlinked, that can spiral into feelings of chaos in the lives of residents and remove their kind of sense of agency and being able to control their own lives. This isn't news, but individuals are often born into disadvantage, and with those experiencing the care system being overrepresented across those in all domains with the poorest outcomes. Next, please, Mark. So just some of the project implications. There was a strong feedback from both residents and key stakeholders within the community that they wanted a common place where they can go to access information, be signposted to services, spaces where the community can come together to build connections and combat isolation and loneliness. On community building, this community capacity building, there was a sense that the council, residents and voluntary sector should work together to create stronger communities. And we've made some really good progress, I think, over the past couple of years in that regard, helping to build networks to support those in all neighbourhoods, but particularly in the most disadvantaged neighbourhoods and those who are struggling in households scattered across the borough. And then thirdly, a really strong sense of the need to focus on the best start in life, support for parents, especially in the early years, aiming to break the cycle of disadvantage and coordinate support for those facing complex challenges or in crisis. And this kind of third point is really where the Think Family project comes in. This is a transformation project that's building on and taking forward the evidence base from the Inequalities project.
Thank you. I'll take on this second half. So with the, sorry, I'll start that again. This Think Family, sorry, the nerves get you sometimes. I'll try again. How do we take this forward? So we're aware of the multifactorial challenges for families, and how can we work around the, how do we develop our services so we're best supporting the wider needs of the family? How do we bring them together? How do we strengthen that approach? Mark, if you go to the next slide, please. So alongside the Inequalities project and that buy-in from these different services, there were some additional drivers behind this project at this time. One was the recommendations from the Ofsted CQC joint inspection in 2022, which said alongside some key strengths around how our adults and children's social services are working together, there's a lack of consistently thinking around the wider needs of the family. Is that information being shared at the right time? So there's a wider piece of work to support that. But with the CQC inspection coming later this year, strengthening that approach, it was an important time for this. Another aspect was developing our early help, early intervention approach, would enable us to be in a better space to go for grant funding from this DFE Stable Homes Built and Loved policy. So they released the last 2 waves of Pathfinder sites, there's 2 more to come. If we put ourselves in the best situation around how we're kind of embedding and developing that whole systems, whole family approach, we get the best opportunity for ourselves for grant funding opportunities. The last 2 I'll just talk to quickly. It's this year we're updating our practice models for our social workers, our patchwork model for adults and signs of safety for children. Both of them espouse very similar themes, how we're supporting the wider households, how we link in different services, but they're not referencing each other at the moment in the ways we might expect. So kind of how do we build this information sharing, wider engagement and support avenues, etc., into those models. And then very finally, they already talked to today, the sort of cost of our late interventions is substantial across our services. So if we can develop our early intervention, early help approach and model across services, the idea is it can mitigate some of those costs. Cheers, Mark. Can you go to next slide? Just to talk through briefly the approach and how we've sort of taken this forward. This is basically, you'll have seen probably this before if you were seeing the Inequalities project. This is just essentially a research informed project. So this is the civil servants guidance around a double diamond approach. So we've gone through this research phase, looked at some of the challenges we have across our services and how they're working together, some of the challenges for families, which I'll talk to in a moment. We've just come out of this phase now of developing where we're going to go. So where does our next steps look like? We're just on the edge of delivering that. So from next month to the following year, we're going to be trialling a pilot project, which I'll talk to in a moment. So that we're not just embedding a new approach that might not work, we're then going to be looking to evaluate how effective it was it value for money, so that we can then look to see, do we want to embed, scale or close that approach down? Cheers, Mark. Okay, so I've got a few slides now on the research phase and some of the key things that have come out of it. So a few key risk cohorts really emerged quite strongly in the quantitative analysis. One was around domestic abuse. So this research in year to date, which was back end of November when I finished that stage, 49% of our children's safeguarding cases had a domestic abuse component. Similarly, there's in housing, there's at least 10 families each quarter that are there for domestic abuse reasons. The understanding is it might actually be higher because you only have to report to offlog one category of why they need priority support. But the other 2 I'll just come to quickly. SEND. So for our permanently excluded children last year, all but 1 had special educational needs in the borough. There are lifelong care considerations, both for children and then into adult social care for a lot of these children and how that's being managed and the wider impact to the households. And then finally, another key cohort was around mental health. So 40% of our children's social care cases in the year to date in the borough had a mental health component. Of that, 24% was adults, 16% children's. And as you'll be aware, there's some real challenges in getting that support from our NHS partners. So CAMS for children's mental health is a 3-year waiting list in the borough at the moment, and some of the waits for talking therapies. Insofar as the national, I'll try and keep on a bit because I'm appreciating we're coming up to 10 o'clock and you'll all be a bit, so insofar as the national picture, over the last, from 2010 to 2020, so on a national basis, early help spending reduced over the decade. So it went down from 3.2 billion to 1.9 9 billion. Over the same time period, late intervention costs rose by 2.2 billion, which meant children's social care across that period actually rose by 40%. Insofar as the children on a national, sorry, again it's the nerves, sorry about this. On a national basis, for children's social care, the demographics are changing, so the age profile is shifting up. We're seeing more teenagers in care than ever before, and we're also seeing a rise in our unaccompanied asylum seeker children. So at time of assessment, 23% in the borough of all our looked after children were unaccompanied asylum seeker children. I'm going to kind of probably have to push on a bit because I am conscious of time. Some kind of key strengths are around our strong early help approach. So it's embedded within the children's service. So there's sort of, you have to kind of go through that assessment. Is there safeguarding needs to get into that support? But it's a holistic service that has a strong link in with schools. So every school in the borough has an early help manager. The DSLs have somebody to go to. I can talk to this slide further. I am conscious of time, Mark, so I'll probably have to rush on a little bit. Okay, so insofar as the research phase, sorry, I just have a quick glass of water.
I'll do this one if you want to.
Bless you, thank you. Yeah, I can come back in after.
So in the discovery phase, we looked at a range of different case studies, found some common themes coming through. So firstly, the escalating circumstances not consistently being shared across different services. So things might escalate to crisis without everybody being aware. And so in some cases that could lead even to legal challenges. So then as in multi-agency situations, senior leadership were forced into then coming into the crisis response to find solutions. Often in those households, there's a multi-generational nature of issues, different generations involved, and actually public transport and accessibility of services came through as a theme too. So there are the challenges in accessing our services, so knowledge at the front door. Sometimes the website is not the easiest to navigate, as I'm sure many of you have seen, and there can be limited awareness of service offer and eligibility thresholds between different parts of the system. So this can mean that there's a lack of effective escalation route and limit the coordination of our approach, and meaning there are challenges in kind of knowing who to contact and bringing that coordination together.
Thanks, Becky. And just to say, just to really kind of flag on that one, that was a key aspect, which was when there was challenges between services, there wasn't an established mechanism. So assistant directors would suddenly have to step in and try to resolve it from that level down. So Mark, if you go to the next slide. Becky, I can do my best to try and carry it back on if you're all right with that.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
If I fluff it too much, I appreciate you sitting next to me. So we also looked at sort of best practice in other local authorities, you know, and some key themes were around having some key examples of best practice. So what we see in quite a lot of authorities is a integrated front door, sometimes called a one-stop shop. So you can come in and you can be supported on the wider needs of the family, and practitioners are empowered to know what to look out for and what options are available. The best local authorities in the country for their and seen as exemplary for their children's social care and whole family responses do make it a whole council approach. It's not just the reserve for children's, but it's the reserve. It's shared across the authority around how the wider needs of the family can be shared between them, how they can best lead into that. You also see, for example, Surrey, Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire have got quite strong escalation routes developed, and to support that, they often have a personalisation fund around that to empower that panel to sort of provide some additional wider support where that's needed. More broadly, there's opportunities for greater joint training, even co-location of staff can support it, and joint reviews between services. And just these last two on early help. So early help at the moment is an incredibly powerful holistic service that reduces the amount of children who end up, and families who end up with their children being looked after. It is embedded in our children's approach. So insofar as how other authorities have that set up in other areas, it's much more accessible. You don't have to go through that route. There are pros and cons to both approaches, but that consideration of how to make an early help approach more central is possibly a key approach to having a council-wide growth preventive approach. Very finally, Greater Manchester was a key example of this. Having the VCSE sector as part of an expanded early help network. So how can they be empowered? Sometimes there's seed funding that goes into supporting that, but how can they become empowered to be part of that wider network, regularly feeding in with the early help service and kind of working to get together around that wider support? Mark, you're right to go to the next one. So these are the last few slides. This is basically what we're doing and where the delivery is going. So the pilot projects, as I say, will be across this next year. What we're looking to trial is a cross-council escalation pathway. So households who require support from 3 or more services, or 2 where there's challenge. We're looking to trial a holistic response and recovery pathway. So inspired by the emergency model, how can we meet that initial crisis? And then how can we respond to help them build that resilience? They don't need, in theory, as Councillor Reeves was saying, teach them how to fish. How can we give them that resilience? So based on the case studies, apologies by presentation, it was much slicker at home, but the key thing that came through in a lot of the case studies was domestic abuse and kind of the challenges around cross-service delivery around that. So we expect that to be a key cohort. Mark, you're right to go to the next slide. Thanks. So just to sort of visualise it, so you've got a bit of a sense of it. So the idea for this is that housing or social work practitioners and children and adults can refer into this pathway if they feel there is a complex multi-agency case around this, or they feel that that might be needed. At that stage, we're recruiting at the moment a fixed-term contract. So this pilot project has been enabled through public health grant funding. So we applied for grant funding and were successful. So a lead practitioner will be essentially talking about the early help model and bringing it more at the centre of how we kind of work more broadly. They will be doing that. So there's something called family network mapping. They're looking at the resilience and the risks across the wider family. What else might need to be supported? So they'll be doing that assessment and liaison. They'll report into a cross-council, what we're calling a gold framework panel. So the phraseology comes from the emergency response. But this is a cross-council body of assistant directors from different services who will be reviewing those plans, coordinating that support and unblocking any barriers. And that's inspired by, I wasn't able to go into it for GDPR reasons, because it's quite a recent case. There was a particular recent case where essentially in an ad hoc basis, we went from worst case, pregnant mother sleeping rough, a lot of complex challenges in how services are working, to cross-council panel coming together to support that family. So we're looking to trial establishing that and what the successes of that programme then would look like for kind of the family, the resilience of the family, de-escalating circumstances, and how it brings together more fully our different services that each have a role to play in supporting families. The last two then, that support, there's a kind of, especially in that, so the response, as I said, is that kind of immediate crisis response as and where that's needed, then followed by a longer recovery phase. So the idea is how can we set down the support needs of the family, how can we work with BCSE and other local options to support that family, build their resilience in the longer term, and schools and other statutory providers. And then finally, the learning. So the idea is not just to do learning evaluation right at the end of the project, but after every single case to see what can we do differently, what learnings come out from that. Mark, you go to the next slide, and that is my very final slide. Becky, do you want to talk to this one?
Yeah, sure. So just to finish up, I think embedding a think family approach has got several key components. So it's about kind of changing the workforce culture and the way that staff think about the whole household. It's about joining up the front door. It's about coordination and community partnerships. So clearly within kind of a 12-month period and one pilot, we're not going to be able to embed a think family approach across the entire organisation. So, but this is just to make it clear that we do have a commitment as an organisation to embed that longer term systems and cultural change. The Think Family is a key transformation programme, both through the pilot that George has outlined, but also through a kind of a wider set of measures across these 5 areas in the pie chart. So that will include front door integration, cultural transformation, so embedding that way of working through training, etc., and looking at implications for commissioning and joining up. So, thank you very much.
Thanks for the update. I'm just sort of conscious of time. Can I suggest if anyone's got any questions, then they can follow up. Thanks for the presentation. Thanks for taking us through it. Unless there's a burning question that you feel needs to be asked immediately or piece of feedback. But otherwise, maybe we follow up with Becky and George and after the meeting. Is that okay? Lovely. Thank you very much. Thanks, guys, for taking us through that. Okay. Just a small agenda item to move on to, then we're going to move on to the budget monitoring report agenda item. We have got a resident speaker who's registered for this item, so Mr. Baldwin, if I invite you to the table, just whilst you get yourself settled, just so Mr. Baldwin's going to take us through, he's got 3 minutes to talk. We'll give him the necessary warnings when that time's starting to run out. It'll be addressing the panel. So it's for the panel to decide if there's any follow-up questions for officers off the back of that. But what I'll do is I'll give you guys the opportunity to comment, but I might just come to you, Elizabeth, for kind of a general response before we move on to questions from the panel themselves. So if you're all set, Mr. Baldwin, all good, right? Your 3 minutes starts now.
Good evening. During your last meeting on the 29th of January, you received a memorable briefing from the Executive Director of Adult Services and Health, in which he warned of the inflationary pressure bearing upon home care and residential placements. Regarding the latter, he said, and I quote, "We are already receiving letters from providers who want 16, 17, 18% increases next year." I was alarmed by this remark because the inflation assumption in the 24-25 draft budget at that time was only 5% across the entire £59 million AHH allocation. I took those concerns to Budget Cabinet on the 20th of February. In response, the lead member for Finance misrepresented his remarks. She falsely stated that he had said some providers, and went on to say that it might be 1 or 2 providers. At the time she spoke those very words, the figures and market analysis in the report before you tonight would have been known to her, to him, and the rest of the Cabinet, the Chief Executive, and the Chief Financial Officer. Yet they all ignored my concerns and voted to adopt the budget as was and send it to Council for approval on the 29th of February, when it passed 30 votes to 8. At that meeting, I asked a question that led to a confirmation of the total anticipated demand for placements, broken down by type and the percentage of those places that had been block booked at fixed prices for 24-25. From those figures—
1 minute remaining.
I have waited an awful long time, Mark. From those figures, it is simple to calculate the remaining demand that must be purchased on the open market. As I reported to you, the balance still to be sourced is more than half of the overall, and most worryingly, 2/3 of the most expensive category. In paragraph 4.6 of this report, we now discover that what started out as providers altered to some providers and 1 or 2 providers is now all providers. The percentage range of the anticipated inflation has been trimmed from 16, 17, 18% to 8 to 16%, which is a huge spread, but even at its lowest point is nearly twice the 24-25 assumption. At its highest—
That's 3 minutes, Chair. Time's up.
Yeah, opportunity to sum it up, Mr. Baldwin, but yeah, that's the 3 minutes up.
At its highest is more than 3 times greater. I was going to finish by reminding you of your responsibilities in the Constitution. It is your responsibility and to scrutinise budgetary management, and I respectfully request that you communicate these concerns to Cabinet and ask that they identify offsets that will allow the AHH inflation growth bid to increase by at least £2 million. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, panel, you've heard Mr. Baldwin's contribution there. Obviously very detailed, so you might want to take a moment to ponder that. But has anyone got any immediate thoughts on reflection before I hand over to Elizabeth? I think for a sort of general response to that. No. Oh, sorry, Councillor Hannon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Carefully to that, got those comments, and I actually did go back and watch the virtual meeting where it was clearly stated by the director that we would have 16, 17, 18% increase by the providers. And it wasn't some providers, but not that I heard, and I did listen twice. And I'm a bit concerned about everything because, as Mr. Baldwin says, our budget is for 5% for care providers increase. And this is quite alarming because it leaves a big gap, not just a small gap, a big gap. And we've known about these huge increases coming for quite a long time. We've had the cost of living crisis, we've had Here to Help, World Cafe events going on and on, knowing that everything was increasing for our residents. And for this particular care providers to have only 5% is very, very concerning. So I really actually would like this to go to Cabinet as an urgent thing, but Mr. Chairman, can I put forward a motion now, or should I wait till after the discussion?
Yeah, end of the discussion if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you, thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Just wanted to thank Mr. Baldwin for raising these points and just basically that I do note them. And I would essentially, I appreciate that sometimes in meetings, if officers are speaking, to be getting every single word precisely right in that live moment. There may be a misunderstanding around some, or may, the reference to providers, does that mean all? It's ambiguous, I don't know. So essentially, I note what you're saying, and I would really welcome any clarification that Elizabeth can provide, to be quite honest, because I can't provide that myself, is essentially what I'm saying.
Thank you. Maybe that's a good time to hand over to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I mean, I think it is important to note that Kevin McDaniel, the DAS, isn't here to defend what he said or to clarify what he said. When we're setting the budget, any contractual increases that we know about are factored into the budget. Any contractual increases that are yet to be negotiated, we put in an estimate. And that estimate is an informed estimate that's actually given to us by, in this case, adult social services. So, we don't restrict it to 5%. I think we're looking very generally here, or rather the speaker's looking very generally here, because he's looking at the overall lump of the budget and saying, what has that gone up by? And that's not how we budget. We budget on a really granular basis. So we look at each contract by contract, and we put in either what we know the increase to be or what we estimate the increase to be. And those increases are negotiated on an individual basis. So just because a provider has asked for something doesn't mean that that's what the provider is going to end up getting. And I think that when the DAS was making those comments, what he was doing was showing the pressure that we are under as a council, the pressure that adult social care is coming under from these market providers to increase prices. And we know that, every council knows that. Every council's facing the same situation. So we negotiate, we do our best to keep them down. We put in estimates for where adult social care and where the DAS thinks we're going to end up on them. We put in estimates based on what across the whole kind of industry, the sort of best guess estimates are on where we're going to end up on these. And we budget really carefully on that basis. So we know that there are always additional pressures coming from our demand-led services. That's very evident from the budget reports that we're turning in each month. And I think that there's a big difference between the budget reports that we're producing for 2023-24 and the budget that we've set for 24-25. We put millions of growth into adults in order to right size the budget for next year. So I don't think anybody's in any disagreement that the budget that was put together for adults in the current financial year just doesn't cover it. But that's why we've addressed that next year and we've rebaselined it. And I would say that the budget that was put forward for next year has the absolute full support of Kevin McDaniel, the DAS, and of Optilis. So we rebaselined, we took their advice, we took their projections, and we created a budget that they were happy that they could stick to for next year. So whether, time will tell on that, because it's a demand-led service. So there can always be more placements, more costs, and that's what we're always trying to mitigate and always trying to go further. Nobody's resting complacently just because we've agreed a balanced budget. We all know that now we're moving into the delivery phase of it, and we all know that in order to mitigate any surprises coming, that we need to always be looking to constantly go further. That's a consistent message that we've got. But I'm confident in the budget that we put. Kevin McDaniel's confident in the budget that we put. And I think that if we're thinking that what he said at the last meeting was him saying that he wasn't happy with the budget, then I do feel that he has been taken out of context. What he was doing was outlining the pressures that adult social care is facing, not that he thought that what had been put together was actually inadequate.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Stephen, did you want to just add to that?
Yeah, I mean, just to make the kind of high level point that the adult social care budget is going up by over 5.3 million next year, to reflect the fact that the budget for this year simply wasn't sufficient. And that was based on the number of people that were in the system. So the budget has been significantly uplifted based on numbers put forward by the service. And I guess the other point about providers is we don't simply accept what providers put to us in terms of their fees. We go as far as possible to negotiate that downwards, and we have a team of commissioners whose role it is to do that. So we do as much as we can to manage the market downwards. That is a risk, and that is a pressure. And I think the other thing that was made clear certainly when this went to cabinet, is that there are risks within any council budget. And there are several risks which are outside of a local authority's control. But I think in terms of the budget, we've seen significant growth in adults, and that's based on the assumptions put forward by the service.
Thank you, Stephen. Councillor Hunt.
Oh, thank you. I thought there was somebody before me. I've just heard that this is best guesstimates of 5%. And yet 23-24 budget, there was 7% put in. And now 24-25, it's 5%. And we're talking about a balanced budget, that this was supposed to be a balanced budget. But if we go to 4.7, we're talking about forecast overspend. And it's not a small amount. This is a large amount. And this is serious. And I think, you know, the cabinet do need to look at this urgently, because this is ongoing. We're only in the 3rd month now, you know, two months after the budget, really, 1 month. So that's what I'd like to put forward.
Elizabeth, you got your hand up there.
Thanks. Yeah, I think we're conflating the 23-24 budget and the 24-25 budget. So we're still in the 23-24 financial year. So the reports that we're looking at now are from last year's budget, not the one that we've just set. So the one that we've just set doesn't kick in until the 1st of April. So we're all agreed that the budget that was set for 23-24 wasn't adequate, especially in regard to adult services. And so that's what we're reporting on. We're reporting an overspend against that inadequate budget. So as Stephen said, we've added £5 million to the baseline of adults for 24-25 to try and address that. And going back to my previous point, it wasn't a 5% uplift on adult social care. It was a contract by contract uplift, because we budget at a very granular level. So you see the summarised numbers that we present, but that's not a sort of arbitrary uplift that we've put on a whole, the whole sort of multiple millions that we spend on adults. We actually budget at a really granular level and build it up from the ground.
Can I come back on that, Mr. Chairman? Thank you. This is a little bit more confusing, I think, there, because you're just saying you're using random figures. You group it all together and then use a random figure.
No. Sorry, to clarify, my point was we don't group it all together and use a random figure. We budget at a granular level. We look at each individual contract and we look at how much that contract is going to increase by. And going back to your point about best guesstimates in the absence of actual figures, best guesstimates is what budgeting is. So where we know what the contractual uplift is going to be, that's what we apply in the budget. Where we don't know what the contractual uplift is going to be because it's yet to be agreed, then it is an informed estimate. That's all you can do when you budget. You look at national trends, you look at national advice, you take the advice and the experience of the service, and you create an estimate for what you think that contract's going to cost you in the following year.
So can you then tell me that the guesstimate that you've done for 24-25, it won't be coming back for more money overspend during that period? Is that right? Because you've got it right now.
We believe that it's our best estimate of what next year is going to hold, but it's a demand-led service. What we do know is that we have rebaselined to accommodate the number of people that we have in the system. So where previously it's been evident that the budget was inadequate, we have added £5 million worth of growth into it to cover the existing number of people in the system and increases in contract costs.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a sort of follow-up question for Elizabeth, taking a kind of a big picture approach. Obviously, the budget was locked at least 4 weeks ago and then approved by full council. And my question is, have there been any events since that point that might impact that budget? So effectively, has anything happened in the last month that jeopardises the assumptions that were made?
Nothing specific. I mean, life is always a moving feast, isn't it? you know, we're operating in a constantly changing environment, and at any second you can have, I mean, if you look at the month 10 budget report, at any second you can have an additional placement, you can have something come through at high cost. So we are always braced for these kind of things. We are always trying to find new ways to mitigate them and offset them. It's a constant challenge in managing any service.
Councillor Teasey.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's good that we have this focus on what is a very, very big number, and ultimately, as in any budgeting, there is uncertainty. So in answer to Councillor Hunt's comment, as the lead member, as the Director of Finance has said, there is uncertainty. There is uncertainty. We cannot guarantee outturn at all. It may be better, it may be worse. We can only make the best assumptions from where we are. Now, when it comes to assumptions, again, as we've said, it's absolutely clear that last year's budget, the sort of 2023-24, which was done in the previous administration, was clearly not right. There's, as we've seen, looking at our month 10 numbers, we were massively under budgeted, and the growth, as it were, in part was due to the huge inflation, not just, well, just generally, of course, which was in double figures in the last year. But again, let's not conflate the year that's just happened versus the year we are about to embark upon, because we've banked that year. We've banked that year, as in, or at least 10/12 of it. It's there now. Looking forward, as has been said, we can only look at the best estimates. Will they be definitely right? Probably not. No, they might be better, worse, or who knows, or they might be about right. Now, I'm given some comfort, number one, because of the process, the fact that it has been a bottom-up budget. And actually that's true, I think, across the board, having this sort of bottom-up budget rather than let's just look at what we did last year and add a bit. Now, I think that is an appropriate way, contract by contract. I'm also given a bit of comfort as well, because of course, thankfully, nationally, the headline rate of inflation has come down from double figures down to something a bit more reasonable. And so that hopefully adds a bit of comfort to it. It possibly is worth clarifying with the lead member for adult services what he meant, but I appreciate the comment that Councillor Wilson, I appreciate that others will have heard or replayed the thing. What I remembered was that he didn't mean that they were all like that very high number. I think that it was just, well, some of them were, but then I don't know. I remember it different. I don't know what he meant versus what he said. I think what he meant is more important, but what is even more important is this budget reasonable? Now, we don't know, but we can only do the best we can. And it just sounds, I think it is, we've heard from the lead that this has been a bottom-up thing. I don't know what, I just think this feels like a bit of a storm in a teacup about some words that were said that might have been said slightly in error.
Thank you, Councillor Teasey. I'll move to Councillor Reeves.
Thanks very much. I mean, quite a few things. I'm not going to go over stuff because time as well and how late it is in the day. But when I was looking at this, I think when I'm listening to the speaker, I did take on board what he was saying, and about that there was this comment that was made. However, I think for me, what I'm looking at is what's in writing, what's in front of me here. And that's, we're looking at, and our role here today is to look at the month 10 budget. And the month 10 budget is of the 23-24 budget, okay? We're not here right now to scrutinise the 24-25 budget. That has happened. It did go through our scrutiny at the time, and it also went through the cabinet and to full council. And if somebody else had, maybe looked at that and thought there was a concern, then that should have been brought up then. However, I don't think that you should then just ignore it. We should be then, during the 24-25 budget, again, doing what we're doing now, which is, again, scrutinising the budget as we go through the year to check that actually those assumptions are actually playing out or not. That's our role here as the scrutiny panel, okay? And we can only do that when we get to that point. Then absolutely, it's great that it's been highlighted to us. We won't forget to look at that when it comes to scrutiny and to see exactly how it's playing out. But certainly with the 23-24 budget, the figures of a 6.7 million forecast overspend, based on the fact that there is a lot more people in the system. It's been acknowledged that the 24-25 has been re-looked at and re-baselined based on that number. So I think that shows that there are lessons learned from that. And also the fact that it's been increased by 5 million to actually allow for the fact that we had an overspend of 6.7 million that hadn't been accounted for in the 23-24 budget. To me, that feels like they have looked at it, they have actually understood that there was an error, and they are trying to put things in place to actually mitigate that issue. So I personally think that's being done. When I look at this, the one thing that I wanted to bring up is just, it says it's particularly noticeable in residential and nursing home places where we are seeing requests for 8 to 16% uplifts. That's what I take. It's written down, it's been confirmed. That is the range that they've obviously looked into in more detail. Someone just sitting there and making a statement. I think this is what I'm looking at. And it says seeing requests. What I would like to know is how many of those requests are actually coming to fruition. Are they actually getting those 8 to 16% increases? Because we're not going to be able to go back on them for the next year's budget. That's what we're going to have to see as a reality. So what I think I'd like from a scrutiny perspective is to make sure that these 8 to 16% uplifts, the requests, how many of them are actually getting approved and how many are actually in a scenario where the providers are working with us to actually bring it closer to what true inflation has been and is. So that's my question around that.
Elizabeth, are you able to talk to that? These requests that are coming in, like what stages we're at with those, where we're up to with some of those ones that you mentioned that were they weren't set at the time of the budget, but have they developed since? Are we close to knowing those figures?
I don't have the detail on that. That's really something that the commissioning team in Optilis is looking at. And so, yeah, if there are any fluctuations that are significant, they would come back and tell us as an ELT. But no, I'm not aware of any at this moment.
Okay.
It's not a detail I have. We would need to ask them.
So when you have it, can we have a commitment to bring that back to the next ONS, whenever that is, after you discover the reality of these requests?
Yeah, I mean, we can put that to Kevin and to Optilis. It's an ongoing thing. It's not, there isn't like a point in time where all of the contracts get agreed. It's kind of as things as contracts expire and need to be renewed, then each one is negotiated.
And I appreciate that. We have a regular ONS every 3 months, so that's why I was saying the next one, as you find that out, I'd like it noted that would be something, just even it's a really brief line, doesn't have to take long discussion, but just to have that reporting back to us, because it obviously had a huge impact on the 23-24 budget. We just want to monitor it as we go through 24-25, just to make sure we're not, again, surprised by this type of...
Yeah, well, we'll certainly be, we in the, as part of the finance report, would be reforecasting on a monthly basis. I think we need to be just a little bit careful about what we are reporting back in terms of contractual negotiations, because what you wouldn't want to do is to come back and say that you'd agreed X percentage with one provider and basically start a run on the bank. So we need to be a little bit cautious, but anything that we are aware of then gets fed into the forecast. So we would see it coming from a distance out.
I think that's a fair
We need
point.
to know somehow. However that comes to us, we need to know. I understand contractual confidence. That's the area that I work in as a day job, so I do understand that, and I appreciate that. But I think there are ways that we can still report on that.
Yeah,
it would be built into the forecasts.
Yeah, I'd anticipate in the budget updates we would know if there was a variance in there. So thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, Councillor Sharp, for being patient there. Councillor Sharp.
One of the elements that seems to be below budget is parking and parking fees, charges. And I wondered to what extent, with the increase in parking charges that was introduced, I think back in February sometime, to what extent have we seen an increase in revenue as a result of that?
We have seen an increase in revenue. We have had a few successful campaigns on parking, so I think most notably Vickers Way. So we're encouraging a lot more usage, and it's something that's a pretty constant topic within the police directorate. So we are seeing an uplift, but it's back to the kind of, it's the same issues we've been seeing this year, that there's lower numbers of people parking. So that feeds through obviously into the final position in terms of income.
Has the increase in charges resulted in higher revenue, or has revenue decreased because of the increase in charges?
Oh no, we're not, we haven't seen us. I think what you're asking is, have we seen fewer customers? No, we haven't seen fewer customers. So I think you'll find that we're ahead on income versus the same time last year. So we are seeing it pick up. We are seeing those increased numbers coming through. We are seeing the campaigns that we're running being successful.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
I'd like to clarify what the purpose of this item on the agenda is. We're looking at month 10, which is January. We're not looking at February, we're looking at January. So car parking increases weren't implemented in January, so there won't be any effect in January. And we will be looking at month 11, presumably the next time we meet, and that's when we will have the information. So I think we need to go back to what it is we're meant to be looking at on this agenda. So I'd like to ask, in 5.1, second bullet point, they have in-depth forecasting and further pressure was revealed, and I don't think this is what we were discussing before. But I understood we'd had lots of investigations, so what was it that prompted for this to be revealed in month 10? And I'll go through all my questions, so that gives a bit of time. Sorry,
Councillor Price, can you just tell me that paragraph number again?
5.1, bullet point 2. It says there was an in-depth reforecasting, but I thought we had been doing all of that anyway. 6.7, which is talking about planning, and planning income is down because there isn't so much development. And if we tie that in with what was said earlier, that means to me there must be spare capacity. And surely this is an income generating opportunity where residents are saying we want to pay for advice when we're planning, and we've said, no, we're not going to offer that service anymore. So we've got a capacity because the big developers aren't there, and we've got a demand. Is that an income generating opportunity for us to consider? Okay. And then under risks, it was talked about temporary accommodation. And there was a new system introduced in 2022. 18 months later, it's found not to have gone smoothly. So I want to know what went wrong, why, what lessons have we learnt so that won't be repeated another time? And then I did actually say at the end, is there any good financial news? But there we are.
Over to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Some of these I might have to refer to the Director of Place, and we might have to come back to you with an answer on the detail in terms of the housing question that you've got. Just in terms of 5.1, where you asked about the reforecasting, so that is actually those were some figures that were coming through to us from AFC, from Achieving for Children. So they had reported a charge of X amount for agency staff, and actually when they did some reconciliations on their ledgers, they found that they had underrepresented that figure. So after they'd done some investigations, they had to come back to us and say, oh, actually there's an extra £360,000 worth of agency staff that we should have recharged to our RBWM that we hadn't identified previously. So that's why that one's suddenly caught up, as it were. So it's a bit unfortunate. I believe that the officer who was responsible for that recharge has actually subsequently left AFC, not because of this issue that's come to light, but they left AFC, new officer came in, was looking in more detail at the finances and found that this recharge hadn't happened. So they're confident that it's not going to happen again, but yes, it's a bit unfortunate that that's catching up. But in terms of your other questions that are more specifically place oriented as to the opportunities in planning and the situation in housing, I think I'm going to have to ask Andrew Durrant, the Director of Place, to come back to you on those ones, if that's all right.
Can I ask that that information is available for Cabinet, because this is going to be presented to Cabinet on Wednesday? Thank you.
Thank you very much. In lieu of anyone else at the minute, one thing, and you know, we've talked about one of them there. I think the thing that stuck out to me was a just short of £1 million movement in a month. Now, I guess a third of that we've just talked about, which was completely unforeseen. But as we're, you know, the number, the overspend number is already quite high. Councillor Price asked for any good financial news. What is your sense of the next 2 months? I know that's very difficult to pin you to numbers. You know, they're still probably coming in from various services, but I guess more movements like that are going to make things very, very difficult and might undermine some of the good work that we've been talking about tonight, you know, looking forward. So just wanted to get a sense really of what you anticipate in these next 2 months, how your confidence levels are with all the numbers coming through.
It's genuinely really difficult to comment, because we're not, you know, we're not talking about trends here per se. You know, you can look at the parking income and say, well, if we've increased the prices by this much, and this is the trend that we're seeing in sort of people parking their cars, then therefore we would estimate the income's going to be X, Y, Z. But what we're talking about here is movements in demand-led services, changes in costs of placements, where things come through from children. It's not about really the contracts and the block bookings the way it is in adults. It's about individual cases and individual requirements of a specific child. So those kind of things, you know, we just can't estimate. The other thing that we're doing, and I've said this in previous meetings, is we are now going through and reconciling our balance sheet, which is something that hasn't been done in a while. So that kind of catch up inevitably throws out numbers, because, you know, we're going into accounts and saying, well, what's in here and where should that be, and is that a positive or is that a negative? So that has the power to swing things quite significantly in either direction. So until we kind of get to the bottom of those and finish our prep for audit, it's very hard to estimate where we're going to end up.
Okay.
I think if you were asking, Councillor Price asked for what's the positives. What I would say on the positive is that every single day we are making progress on getting to the bottom of everything and controlling everything. And that is very positive. I feel really quite sorry for my finance team some days, because all we are ever doing is delivering bad news, really. But what's happening behind the scenes is a huge amount of work to actually investigate and control and report. And I think that the quality of the monitoring, the way that we're looking at things, the depth that we're looking at things, the coverage, you know, things that haven't been looked at in a really long time, we are now getting to the bottom of, so that we can have a real level of confidence in the numbers that we're producing. And that's a huge amount of work, a huge amount of effort from the team, a huge amount of commitment from all of the service areas and their participation in that. And I'm really proud of the work that the team's doing. But still, fundamentally, we're producing reports that deliver bad news. So everybody's kind of, oh no, it's finance again. So yeah, really proud of the work that the team's doing and the involvement across all the service areas in it.
Thank you. I did notice that the outstanding debt had reduced since our last report, so that's good news as well. Still more to do, but
yeah, and as part of the transformation programme, we're bringing in additional support on that, because that was something that we worked into the budget. So we are expecting that to improve even further.
That's great. Lovely to hear. Right. I think that's everyone's comments. So thank you. I know it's late in the evening, so thanks for putting the effort in on that agenda item. Councillor Hunt, you earlier on suggested about proposing a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it was to highlight the importance and the urgency that the adult social care packages providers should be taken into consideration.
Do we have a seconder on that recommendation to go forward to Cabinet?
Well, it's for it to go to Cabinet, but we are concerned with that they need to know that we are concerned with the very high cost of care providers that could come around, as our section Elizabeth said, might or might not be, as Councillor Reeves says, from 8 to 16%. But certainly Cabinet need to be made aware that this could happen in the financial year of 24-25. Well, we're coming to the end of 23-24.
If that recommendation was seconded, then that would, and voted on by the panel and agreed, that would then go forward to Cabinet on Wednesday for consideration. So they would see that this has been noted by the panel.
We're voting on
a recommendation.
A recommendation.
That in the rest of this financial year, the contract prices for adult social care could increase by more than the estimated amount, but wasn't it the estimated amount that was put in for next year?
This is the 24-25.
But okay. Sure, I follow your logic on that, but go on.
Oh well.
Can I just be clear? I'm not sure. I'm trying to think about why we're putting forward a motion for the 24-25 budget when our agenda item is the 23-24 month 10, and they just don't correlate to the agenda item that's been put forward before us. So I'm just trying to. I do understand your concern, because I raised a concern as well that they should be looking at. But what I did say was that we need to look at that as we go through 24-25. And that it should be brought to us as they negotiate or they find out the exact percentage, which I believe Elizabeth did acknowledge that they would do as part of the financial reporting back to us in 24-25. But I just don't know why we're putting forward a motion that isn't relative to the agenda item.
Yeah, I'm also sorry. I'm
that was
confused on it a little bit, but my my concern, if there was one coming from this particular subject, would be that I would be asking the finance team and the CEO to confirm that the estimates that they have put in next year's budget are still, in their opinion, realistic and fair and reasonable. That would be my greatest concern, because we've already heard that we believe that the budget was underestimated this year, that there's been a huge amount of money pumped into it for next year, with an increase which was, I think, was it 5% increase of inflation for next year? So the granularity, the thing which is most important is, do we have the right budget for next year? And are the variables still reasonably fair and reasonable?
Councillor Wilson, did you want to?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think for me, the responses that Elizabeth has given this evening, for me, shows that there is a clear understanding around the council that the budget is based on, a number of estimates, and that those estimates were known. And per my question a few minutes ago, nothing has materially changed or significantly changed since the budget was signed off to now. And this is basically what we see, or what the Cabinet will see from their monthly reporting. So I'm not sure it's necessary for us to give a recommendation, because I think Cabinet already know and will already be doing the monitoring.
Thank you. Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, it's partly a point of order, Chair. I think that if Councillor Hunt wants to amend her recommendation to the budget of 23-24, I think that would be more accurate. And we're talking about month 10 here, so I reiterate what everyone said, really, basically. I don't think the motion is relevant to what we're discussing tonight, but if she amended the amendment to 23-24, then that could go forward under this current agenda, I would have thought.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Mary's right. There's a risks register, and risks are detailed. And these are the risks. They have been detailed about the uncertainty. So I think the Cabinet know, and the officers are already aware of it. So I don't think we're saying anything they're not aware of. And I think it's there in the risks analysis.
Councillor Hunt, if we come back to you just to kind of reply to some of that, and then we'll have to move towards an action.
Yeah, I can understand. Thank you. My concern is this is the 23-24 budget. We've seen the outcome of it and the overspend. We have been given our budget for 24-25 with a 5% increase in adult services. No, I'm told. In the care provider, no. Okay. So have we been, what, I can see Elizabeth Griffiths nodding her head at the back. Can I ask what percentage increase?
On a contract by contract basis, we put in the increase for each provider on a contract by contract basis. It was not a blanket 5% uplift.
Because from what I read, both Elizabeth and Mr. Chairman, I think we had 52, and it went up to just under 59 in the budget for 24-25. That equates to something like 5% the care, adult social care.
That would be the 5 million that you talked about at the start. I mean,
So my concern is that the Cabinet need to be aware that there is, I'm sure they are aware, but I think we need to just say and have it in writing that we're aware of the issues that may come forward. And the Cabinet has got such a lot of papers to read, and they do expect us to report back to them. So that was my concern, Mr. Chairman.
Try and bring this to a head, but Councillor Reeves.
Well, I'm hoping to be able to do that. It's written in this budget under 4.7 that they are seeing requests for 8 to 16% uplifts in existing placement. I don't see how much more clear you can make that. It's already written here. We don't need to do another motion to tell them what's already written in this plan. And this plan is for the 23-24. We're looking at month 10. I'm just really getting a little bit tired of trying to go off piste here, because we're talking about something that's not relevant to this particular agenda item. I want to reiterate, this is the 23-24 budget, month 10 forecast review, not 24-25 budget review. And your concerns are written down under 4.7, and the cabinet have seen this and they will see this. So can we either do a seconder or just move on, please?
Yeah.
I'm happy to have seen this and will see it, or will see it by the nearest date, is it Thursday?
Yeah, I think it's probably worth noting that they'll see your concern in the minutes. Okay, so if you're happy with that, then I think we can move forward. I think the point to raise as well is, you know, as this budget unfolds into the new year, it's our job to make sure that these variances are tracked and highlighted. So, okay, so if everyone's happy with that, then it's a case of accepting the report and moving on to the next agenda item. Is everyone happy with that? Okay, thank you very much. So that brings us to the last two agenda items. I'm fairly certain everyone in the room wants these to be fairly quick, as do I. But just, Mark, you're just going to tell us briefly about an upcoming annual scrutiny report process.
I was just going to say, Chair, I'm very happy in the interest of time to just send everyone an email about that offline after the meeting and save us all the time now.
And should we suggest the same for the work programme?
I'm very happy to do that.
Yeah.
And the annual scrutiny report as well.
Is everyone happy with that? We'll follow up. Okay, well, in which case,